All right, so we're starting out
Thank
talking
you,
about
V.
what?
She said she can see it.
See
Conan
what?
being
Conan
attractive.
O'Brien? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I I don't know. I mean, hey, if you find him attractive, sure.
Tall,
Anyway,
smart.
yeah, sure. I mean, I love him. I think he's awesome, and I think he's super funny and humble. But attractive wise,
Tall, incredibly intelligent. The square face. I don't know.
all right. All right, so the first thing we're talking about tonight is costume designers and how costumes reveal character. And this stuff comes from masterclass.com. Costume designers are individuals in charge of designing the clothing elements worn by the actors. So they don't have to be like these extravagant costumes that medieval times, knight armor, or giant king's robe and gown and whatever else. It can just be regular street clothes, a t-shirt, some jeans, but the kind of style it is, how dirty or messy it is, or how clean and like is it firmly pressed, is it wrinkled, what style of shirt, what
Does
color.
it look like a theater performance or does it actually look used and lived in? Is like a huge thing that could take you out of the movie.
That too. So all these things go into it, and that's what costume designers are in charge of figuring out what's the best look for this character based on the story. Costume designers need to choose outfits that fit the story, the character, the time, and the place that the film takes place in, while also making them durable enough to withstand the elements and scenes in the film. They start their process by doing a close reading of the script, carefully analyzing plot, tone, and period of the story. They then have conversations with the writer, director, production designer, DP, and sometimes others like producer and other creatives on the project to figure out if they've covered everything. And then the costume designer begins researching the history and trends of the time period and location that's in the script. They'll compile a collection of visual references for specific materials, patterns, or clothing pieces to help for references when designing their final designs. And when making the actual design, the costume designer must ensure each outfit effectively communicates the age, social status, and dramatic function of each character, while also keeping in mind that those things might change over the course of the story, which is why, we have characters that have multiple outfits, multiple costumes.
Yeah, and also keeping in mind, so basically they also keep in mind as well as historical and status and social economical, that kind of thing. But they also have to think about the character, who they are, what their personality is, and how they progress through the story and how they can show that through their clothing without being too obvious or too loud or just seeming like it would be something that a normal person would wear and not standing out too much.
Right. Or standing out
because
a lot
that's
that's the intention. But
if
it
the
should be
script
intended.
calls for it, if it's their personality, yes.
Right. So each individual costume is designed and put into what is called a costume plot, which is just tracking each character chronologically through the story and documenting their changes in attire. So how many outfits do they wear? How many story days is in the script? And how many outfits? Is it a character that just does not care and they're kind of lazy? Maybe they're wearing the same outfit 3 days in a row, so it doesn't really matter. But other characters who want to always have a different look, maybe they're changing twice a day. So they have to really look into the character and figure out how many outfits they're going to wear, what kind of outfits they're going to wear, and then they plot it all down in this document to make sure that they're keeping track of all of the costumes that need to be made and when they're going to appear in the scene.
Another thing is also if it makes sense to the scene happening, because this character is a certain personality and the story is a certain way, but if they're in a situation that they're not used to or a situation that doesn't really match with their wardrobe and it's not supposed to stand out, then for example, if they are like cleaning a car, for example, they're not going to be like in expensive clothing or in like dressed a bunch. They're probably going to be in like really, like if they're going for a hike, they're going to be in like active wear. They're not going to be wearing like tight jeans, hopefully.
Unless they're a character that's never hiked before and they're not sure and they don't know. So then maybe they'd come in something else. But yeah, it has to make sense with the story, but also the character in that situation. So even though the production design is done, it depends after that on the character. Is this going to fit in with the rest of the color palette and all of that stuff? And does it make sense to the story? But also the character, what would they be doing in that situation? How would they represent themselves through their costume, through their outfit?
I was going to say on the subject of color palette, that is also extremely important, because you have to look at the color palettes that the cinematographer, the director are using, and match it to your character. Like, okay, this is a bright movie, but my character wears darker shades of clothing. Like, yes, she can wear the same colors, but darker shades if that's more in line with her personality. Or maybe it's a darker movie, but she wears brighter shades. So you also have to think about color and what it communicates in the script and how to balance it out to where it makes sense and it's not super jarring, or it's the subtleties. If you're trying to tell a story, like have that color have a meaning, make sure that that color is only used in those scenes where it's supposed to have a meaning, or where it's supposed to be a subtle meaning of something, instead of just, this is what it means sometimes, so she's going to wear that all the time. No, you have to be very intentional, where, okay, in these moments this character wears this color, or this shade, and you also have to keep that in mind and balance it out.
Yes. So the costume designer will think of all of that stuff. They'll read the script, they'll figure out the characters, have discussions with the director and the cinematographer and things like that for lighting conditions, and then to the director for maybe some backstory on these characters, what their intention is, what they see, how they were raised, and how they live. Even if it's not in the script, or it's not even going to be shown in the movie, they still have to figure that stuff out so they can figure out how these people might dress and how they might again represent themselves, because that's
and
what
the lighting
getting dressed
sorry
in.
honey
Go ahead.
and the lighting conditions, for those that don't remember, is also because that can affect the shade that's shown on camera, like the tone, the like shade of the color and how it looks, how bright it is, how dark it is. Lighting also affects it a lot, so that's another thing that they have to take into consideration.
Yeah, if they're trying to do a night scene, or if they're trying to do a daylight scene, they're going to use different lighting conditions, and so the color of that outfit will be a bit darker or brighter depending on what kind of light is shining on it, or what color temperature of light is shining on it. And so the production designer and the costume designer needs to know what kind of lighting is going to be used on set, so they can do the color that they want to end up in the final frame after it's shot, not just how it looks when you're making it, because it's going to look different under different lighting conditions.
Honestly, sorry, honey, go ahead, finish. I was just going to say the most interesting thing for me through this whole thing is just seeing how much the wardrobe affects, because most people don't really think it's that big of a deal, or it's only that big of a deal in period pieces or in specific movies. But every single film, like, you can notice that if your character is dressed weirdly or differently, or just clashing with the rest of the story, or it doesn't seem like their character at all, like they're preppy and they're dressing goth, or they're goth and they're dressing something like that, it can take you out of the story. Like, one major thing that I always think about is, if anyone's seen Pretty Little Liars, for example, one thing that people used to complain a lot about those kinds of teen drama shows on the CW or on Freeform or whatever was that they were dressed in designer and high heels in school and all of this stuff. And it just kind of takes you out of it, because aren't they supposed to be in high school? Like, there's a dress code. It would be uncomfortable to walk around the halls in like 10-inch heels every single day, all the time. How can they afford these designer handbags? Isn't she supposed to be poor, or like her mom, like low middle class or whatever? So those kinds of things, even though the designer's like, oh, we want to be able to sell clothes and our make our characters fashionable and all this stuff, relatable to girls, or to get a endorsement or product placement, we also have to think about the script and does that even match? Because that is a huge thing that can take you out of the story.
Yeah, and it's not noticeable until it is. The whole point of like production design, costume design is you shouldn't notice it unless they are intentionally trying to make you notice it by having like her in yellow. Obviously, she stands out from the rest of the frame right now. So that's intentional. But if they weren't trying to do that and they just said, yeah, bring whatever, and she brings a yellow dress, and now she's standing out more than the crowd. And in the scene, she's supposed to blend in with everybody. It's just not going to fit. Or maybe she's a really shy character and she doesn't like to express herself that way and be noticed more. So she's not going to wear as bright of colors or as contrasting colors to everyone else. She's going to wear more tones that everyone else is wearing so that she doesn't stand out. It's just going to be one of those things that you don't really notice it if it's done right, but if it's done wrong, something in the back of your head is like, something's wrong here, and sometimes you just can't put your finger on it, but that could be what it is.
And that goes for a lot of underrated aspects of filmmaking. I feel like if you're doing your job right, people aren't supposed to notice as much. It's supposed to be more subtle, but because of that, it's a little underappreciated or misunderstood in some cases.
Yeah, definitely. So once a production sorry, I keep saying production designer. Once a costume designer figures out the costumes they might want to go with for each scene, they do little sketches like the thing on the left, or they do a little bit more detailed ones like this one. They bring that to the director, and excuse me, and the director and the production team will either reject it and tell them to do it again. Producers might say that's going to cost too much. We don't have that in the budget. Try again. A director might say that doesn't look like what I'm going for. It doesn't match, or just doesn't look like the character I was envisioning. Try again, and give them some notes on what to do differently. But if they like it, they're going to sign off on the costumes, and the costume designer gets to work on actually creating them. Sometimes they start completely from scratch, depending on how unique and different that costume is. Other times they might buy different pieces, like to sew together, or just different shirts to go with different outfits, and they don't have to create it from scratch. They just buy it already made.
Especially if you're trying to make like a character with layers and not just a stereotypical character, because you don't want to dress them in like, okay, this is a goth person, so they're only going to wear black, or okay, this is, because real people don't, like, their fashion sense isn't normally just one thing. They experiment, they try different things, there are textures involved, and so that also has to go into like, all right, we need to make it something that's realistic, that's attainable, that's not too expensive, but also something that feels like a real person wear.
And that's where research goes in as well. Like, even if you're making a sci-fi movie set 800 years from now, you still want to look at trends. You can see these in like Star Wars and other movies that do futuristic or otherworldly sci-fi. They take inspiration from stuff that's done in the past, ancient Egypt or other ancient civilizations, or just, things done within the past 200-300 years. And they just take something that looks pretty unique that's already been done and it's a little realistic, and then kind of change it and tweak it and change it up to make it match whatever film they're making or whatever show they're creating. But after they create it, they're going to create the costume, and then the costumes are going to be altered after fittings with the cast. So once the cast is finalized, they're going to come in and they're going to start tailoring it to them so that it fits them perfectly, or doesn't, if they're trying to intentionally make the outfit look awkward on the character. Like, maybe it's a character that's never dressed up in a suit before, and so they don't really buy a fitted suit. They buy one that has the shoulders kind of poking out too far, and they feel kind of awkward in it. And so the point of it is to not match it directly to the actor, but to kind of give it a little bit of a awkward feel. But other than that, if they're trying to perfectly match it, they will tailor it to the actor after the costume's created, because usually the cast isn't fully involved yet. at that point when they're starting to create costumes. Sometimes they are, but it depends on the production. Costume designer might also, oh, this is also another costume plot, kind of shows in scene 2, scene 3, scene 4, and it shows which costumes are used by which characters and in what locations they are going to be in on the left. But then a costume designer might create their own mood board. So a production designer has these, and a production designer and a director work to make these to kind of illustrate the look of the film. A costume designer might create one to kind of show the look and the materials they might be going for the costume. So based on when it's set, all of those things that they have to research, they're going to grab materials that look similar or close enough to things that are going to match the material that needs to be used in the costumes for the film. And they'll display all this on a mood board to kind of show what look of costumes they're going for, especially if they're working with a team of costume makers and things like that. They also have to work within the budgets to make sure that the costume prices aren't going over, or that the labor for the team that they're hiring isn't going over, so that they can get these costumes made within the budget that they are given. Depending on the budget and the amount of costumes needed, it's going to determine how many crew are in the costumes and wardrobe department. Other roles are costume designer, assistant, costume maker, costume supervisor, dresser, breakdown artist, costume runners, and costume trainees. So it's a whole department within itself. Costume supervisors oversee the day-to-day use of the wardrobe and plan accordingly. They make sure that the costumes are there on set when they are needed. So if a scene goes behind a day and they're not planning to have that costume, they weren't planning to have the costume for the next day of production, but now they have to record one of the scenes the next day. Costume supervisor is going to make sure that that costume gets to where it needs to be for the next day of production, so that scene can be created without any hiccups or waiting around for the costume to get there. Costume makers cut fabric and sew costumes based on the costume designer's sketch or design. Breakdown artists use dyeing and aging techniques to make a costume look old and worn. Dressers monitor the quality and continuity of the costumes before and after takes. So they make sure that
you can, I was just gonna say, one of the big things that people complained about with the Aladdin movie, the live action, among many, was the wardrobe and how awful it was, because it looked like a play. It looked so polished and so new and so fake, and it didn't feel real. It felt like a stage production. It felt like squeaky clean. And these people are in the desert. They run around, they walk around, it should feel more lived in. It should feel real. And it felt like it was a stage performance in the sense of like squeaky clean, I think most people know what I mean when I say that.
Yes,
but yeah,
and
that was huge.
And that's where that's where if they had breakdown artists, if they didn't have breakdown artists, the costume designer or somebody on the costume and wardrobe team should have either brought this up or tried to do it to add some wear and tear, add some, like you said, they're in the desert, so maybe throw some sand in some parts of it and just kind of rub it in. That way it doesn't look completely like it's fresh out of the factory costumes, because they're supposed to have been wearing those outfits for a while.
Yeah, some people made
princess
the
and
argument of
kings, it depends on how often they wear their outfits. Those can be a lot more pristine than others, but clothes like peasants and street thugs and whatever else, those need to be pretty beaten up because they are poor, they don't have enough money to fix them up, and they're always running around in the dirt and everything. So
because even if it was a musical and we wanted it to be a little more theatrical, a lot of people complained that it was to the extreme that it took you out of the movie a lot. And if that many people are complaining about a thing that they didn't think would be that important, then it must be important. You know.
However, it is the final decision, I would say, does, go up to the director or the producer, whoever is going to put final say into that design. If they wanted to make it more of a theatrical feel, then that is definitely a way to do it. And sometimes it might work, sometimes it might backfire. It just depends. You never know what an audience reaction will be. Typically speaking, you do want to add some where to both props and the costumes. You want to add, like, it just gives it a sense of realism. Star Wars director George Lucas was famous for saying, like, no, I want to, because back then sci-fi was all like looking fantastical, brand new, shiny, and he wanted the world to feel lived in. So he told the props makers, costume designers, and whoever else, like, no, this doesn't work. It looks too shiny. It looks too new. Add some dirt, add some sand. They're in the desert. They're in the forest. I don't want it to look like, they just, they shine this thing every day. They don't have time to shine their gun. So add some dirt to it. Give it a little bit of a rugged feel, because that's going to give it a little more of a realistic look.
And it's more immersive too. It helps immerse you into the world and buy that world is real and that these people are living this and that they look like they've been through it,
Mm-hmm. Moving on from that, there's dressers. Dressers, like I said, they monitor the quality and continuity of the costume. So they make sure if there is anything, if there's multiple layers to a costume, sometimes part of it might come out of place. If someone's wearing a tie, it might be a little bit shifted to one side or the other after multiple takes. They're the ones that are going to view it, take pictures, and make sure everything is matching continuity-wise for the costumes. So if a production has a dresser, they will be there to make sure the continuity and quality are maintained. If there's a tear, they're going to make sure to try to patch it up. If they can't, then it becomes a whole other thing where they have to figure out if the director's okay with that, and if the costume designer needs to take it back and what they need to do. But they just make sure that everything is following continuity as far as the costumes go. Costume runners are production assistants that work in the costume department. They assist in dressing, supporting actors. So maybe not the main actors, but like side characters and especially extras when they need to get into costume. They help assist with that. Some of these costumes are big and bulky, especially, the old war movies with swords and armor and all of that. Those things are pretty hard to get into, and they're pretty bulky and have a lot of pieces. So even back then in real life, people needed to help to get into a lot of those uniforms or outfits. So when it's made to look realistic, it also has many pieces, and it's really hard to get into by yourself, and you usually need somebody to help you, and that's where costume runners will come in to help dress some of the actors. They also go and get things for the costume department, so if there's anything they need to pick up or return, they're the ones sent off to go do that. That's why they're called runners. And they also do they might also do the costume purchase returns. So or rental returns. So if there's any costumes that they rented or purchased and they're going to return it to the costume, like a costume store pretty much, then they will be the ones sent off to go bring it back when they're done with it. And then costume trainees are like interns. They just learning the job functions and getting trained on the job. So that's just what they are. And that's most of the team of the wardrobe department when it comes to just like the people underneath the costume designer. Costume designers also create a budget for the costume, labor, and materials. So they don't just follow the budget. They're the ones to create it for their department and get it signed off. And the production designer will overlook their department's budget and add that in with the rest of the art department as a whole. But the costume designer will make sure that their budget is following suit. For certain outfits and costumes, there's going to be multiple versions of the same thing. These are called doubles, triples. and etc., depending on the quantity of identical costumes you have. So there might be different variations on a costume. One's called a hero version. That's like the best, fanciest, most expensive version that looks the most realistic, the cleanest version. And it's used for like close-ups and scenes that don't require fighting or situations that could cause wear and tear to the costume. And then you might have other variations of the costume. And the hero might have a copy. It might have two hero costumes, which are like perfectly identical and the most pristine version of the costume. And then let's say if it's Superman, he has his, once he creates it or starts wearing his suit, that's the hero version. And then once he fights in it, it's going to start getting some wear and tear on it. It's going to get some dirt. It's going to get some, it's going to be exposed to the environment, and it's going to be exposed to like villains punching him and things like that. So it's not going to look exactly the same. And they don't just beat up the hero version. They actually create a different variation of the costume most of the time, depending on how big the budget is. They create a different variation of the costume, and they just beat it up a little bit to have the beat up version and the hero version. And then, if you're going through your whole movie and you keep getting more and more blood on the suit, or you keep getting more and more tears, or stuff keeps happening to it, there's going to be a new variation, a new version. That way, if they need the old one, if they have to go back and do any retakes or pickups or anything like that, they have that version of the costume, and they don't have to figure out how to get it to match continuity wise. It's also so that if one tears, you have an extra and you don't have to stop all of production to make another costume. So anytime you see a character with blood, dirt, tears on their clothes after a fight, it's actually just a different version of the same costume. Clean version is still somewhere on set behind the scenes in the wardrobe department. Costume designers may also collaborate with hairstylists and makeup artists as well to ensure that they are working toward the same kind of look. So that's a big thing, and a production designer will usually have some say in that as well, to make sure that everybody is going to follow the same look. But the costume designer with the hairstylist and makeup artist definitely have to collaborate to make sure that the makeup of the character, the hair styles that they have, and the outfits that they wear are going to match in some way or contrast purposefully, so that they can create that character. It would be weird if the character had some hairstyle that looks nothing like the kind of clothing that they wear. If they're very expressive and they wear the bright, vibrant colors and it's very extravagant clothing, but their hair is just like kind of plain, kind of messy, it wouldn't really make sense as much as if they had pristine hair and an elegant, extravagant dress. So costumes in film and television are not about fashion. They're about telling the story and creating character for the people that wear them. You can tell a lot from a character's costume.
Unless
Go ahead.
it is a show about fashion as well. Like in Sex and the City, they would use a lot of designers that they would end up making those designers a lot of money because it would be on the show, and then they'd sponsor them, or then they'd, be like happy to like talk about them more. So sometimes if it's about fashion, you would also add fashion, but it has to be incorporated into the story as well. Like Carrie's outfits were very Carrie, and Charlotte was a lot of Chanel, and so it was a lot of their personalities in it.
Yeah, or like if the character is in fashion, or like Rachel from Friends, and they might wear clothing that is very fashionable, even though they might not need it all the time. They might just want to look their best because they're in fashion. It just depends on that character. Those are specifically about fashion. Those characters are specifically in fashion, which is why fashion becomes a big part of it. Yes. But for most things, it is just, it's more dependent on how am I going to make this thing look unique and different and make them be their own character, be them. Like, what is this character? Who are they? How do they express themselves? Try our best to show it through their clothing. That's the costume designer's whole thing. They want to try to express
Of
the
course,
character and show what this character thinks and who they are without them even having to say a word. And you can do a lot just by seeing somebody's clothes and how they represent themselves.
of course, there's also the matter of making the character more relatable or more likable. And in that sense, they might want to focus on fashion in that sense as well. Like, okay, this is a 13-year-old girl, like in the movie Eighth Grade. I think she was 13. And it was like, okay, how would do 13-year-olds dress? And what would be her style mixed with her parents' style, stuff that, because those teenagers care a lot about fashion, or at least a lot of teenagers do anyway. And so that is, and also they're young, so self-expression is important to them through their clothing. So that is something that also has to be kept in mind. So fashion does play a role. It just cannot be like the main thing, like, okay, we have to think what's fashionable, what's going to sell, but that does have to be something that um, that we think about, even if it's not fashion. Like The Devil Wears Prada even showed that, where she said she didn't care about fashion, but she still chose an outfit that was comfortable to her, and that in a way that color was on a runway, if I'm remembering correctly, it was a color that was in a season at a certain point. She just chose that outfit that was a little different looking, but it was still the same color. So that's another thing that you have to think about. Even when characters don't care about fashion, it still reflects on their fashion choices.
Right,
If
but
that
that
makes
goes
sense.
back to I don't know, like that goes back to being about character again. Like it's about what the character thinks and how they express themselves.
No, I know.
More
I'm just
so,
making it sense that
more so
when
than
you
it
work
being
as a
a
costume
fashion
designer,
statement or showing the latest trends of the even of the time. If you're going back 50 years, if you have a really quirky character that's different or that wants to not follow the crowd, they might not wear anything like what was worn back 50 years ago because they're trying to be different.
or they
So
might wear a different style. Yeah. I'm just saying, if you want to be like, for people that work in the clothing department, that is something they have to take into account as well, are the trends of the time and that kind of thing as well. I just wanted to make that point, because sometimes you're like, oh, well, it doesn't matter about fashion. Well, that's part of the culture. That's part of the history. That's part of, you know, that research.
right. All right, so we can tell a lot about it where we can tell a lot from a character's costume, like how well off they are. Are they rich? Do they look like they are from an elegant home? Or are they poor or of a lower class, upper class, lower class, middle class? The clothing styles, especially of the time, this is going back to the time, but the time of Titanic, you have people that wore more elegant, fancy stuff that was more expensive, and you have people that wore more dull colors that was a little bit cheaper. And this is more of like an Irish style as well, because that is where a lot of people were coming from to go on this ship to be the workers and stuff. So you can tell that just by looking at their clothing. You can tell if they are trying to want attention and stand out from the crowd, like we were saying. So she's wearing a red dress when everyone else is wearing black. So she's really trying to stand out compared to everybody else. Or I mean, maybe not as literal of an example of this, but if they want to blend in. So they might want to blend into the background. They might just want to blend in with the crowd. So they might just wear a little bit more dull colors. Obviously, this is an extreme example where she's trying to match the background exactly, but you get the point. And so we can figure all that out and a lot more just based on these characters' costumes and what they wore and how iconic they are and how different they are, no matter what time period you're going to, what gender, and what location. These people can have different outfits dependent on who they are and what they are trying to express of themselves, as well as matching some of the trends of that time or some of the fabrics that were around and color design and all of that. And then it's like, does the character take good care of their clothes, or do they let them get damaged and ruined? person's shoes. Some people take very good care of their shoes and make sure that they're clean and that they hate getting dirt on them, even at the bottom. And they try scrubbing it all off to make sure their shoes are just as pristine as can be. And it shows that they really care about their shoes. They might not even be a person who is well off and is financially
They just put a lot of
successful.
effort into their appearance.
Exactly. And that really goes back to the character thing and who they are and who they are trying to show themselves as. What kind of style does the character wear in the film? Is it in with the times, or is it considered outdated? Is it ahead of its time, or is it unlike anything we've seen? So Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, he wore that purple, I think it was the jacket, and he had some things that,
top hat.
yeah, and he had some things that weren't around until when that story was based. Those that fashion sense wasn't around until years and years later. And so we could say that he was ahead of his time. He was a visionary. Other people might wear clothes.
Or just pretentious.
Other people might wear clothes that are more dated. If the film's set in the 90s, they might wear clothes that are from the 70s or 80s. And people might be like, they don't have fashion sense because they're not sticking to that time period's fashion. They are sticking to something else that they liked in the past. Or it might just look completely different that we've never seen, depending on where it's at. Maybe it's in our world and the character's just really quirky, so they're trying to wear something crazy and different. Or maybe it's from another planet or another galaxy or something like that, and they might wear something like Darth Vader, which is iconic suit. Then it's are the
also because the man literally needed help to breathe.
Right.
It wasn't even a fashion statement. He just needed the oxygen.
But without that in the costume, it wouldn't come across as well of why he's breathing so much. They had to add that little box and that little breathing mask and everything to make sure that it represents what the character is supposedly going through. Are the clothes practical and serve a purpose, or are they purely for looks? We can draw many conclusions from what our characters are wearing, especially when we know a few other details about them. For example, we already said this, but example, like maybe a character is rich, but they don't dress fancily. Well, we can assume that they don't really care how they look, or maybe they just are lazy and don't want to keep up with fashion, and
or they're trying not to appear that they have money. They're trying to hide it, or they're trying not to bring too much attention to themselves. They might loathe the fact that they have money and like resent it and just be like, well, screw that. I'm just going to dress like a normal person, or like the average person dresses.
True. Or maybe they're poor, but they do dress really fancily, and maybe we can draw from that they might spend all their money on clothes, or they might just pretend that they're better off than they actually are.
You can even see people use cheaper materials, but still try to make them into like elegant silhouettes of the time, so that they appear like better off than they are, or more elegant than they are as well. Like cheaper colors, but more like fancy silhouettes type thing. That also is a way that I've seen it done in movies and stuff.
Yeah.
Using a little extra detail, like a scarf or a hat, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and those little tiny things that we might not really pay that much attention to, we still subconsciously draw conclusions from just what we see. We see like what we see and what we know about the characters so far. And as we learn more about them, we start to draw more and more conclusions about who they are based on the details that we do know and the details that we have to fill in by looking at their wardrobe and their house and their car and their room, and all the production design that goes into these films will give us a lot of these details that otherwise wouldn't even be there, because the script doesn't specifically say, sometimes it does, but most of the time it's not going to specifically say she wore a dress that was black and had red trim and white gloves. It's just going to say she wore a black dress, or she wore an elegant dress, or something like that. Or it might not even say she wore a dress at all. They might just say she went to a party, and then the costume designers like, okay,
Sometimes
she's going to probably, this is a fancy party and she is rich, so she's probably going to be wearing something very elegant. And she wants
sometimes
to,
in the
and
script,
maybe she wants to make sure that her mother's happy. So she's going to dress the way her mother wants her to dress at that event, that kind of thing.
yeah, sometimes in the script, there for a character, what they wear is like very important. For example, Cruella de Vil and her black and white coat. That is like something that is probably maybe not in the script, or might even be like, oh, because she wants to make a coat, for goodness sake. So like there is some attention drawn to it, but that the script might not tell you exactly how they want the coat to look. It just might mean, oh, she wears a black and white coat. And then it's the designer's job to like, and maybe alongside the director to see, okay, how do you envision this looking? And then make like draw samples and show them like, these are my design ideas, and you work together to find the look that you think would work best along with their personality and their character. I don't know if that was a good example, but that's kind of, I just meant that sometimes it is in the script. It's just not going to be in like extreme detail, or sometimes it is, but that doesn't mean that because of that, you're going to get the exact same thing as the finished product.
It is in the script, but it depends on how important it is in the script. So if it is important, the more important it is, the more detail the writer is going to put in there to kind of cue that, hey, like you got to pay attention to these details. Like it's got to be this, that, and the other. But normally if it's like, like you said with the black and white, if it's just colors and stuff like black and white, they're just leaving it up to the filmmakers to come up with their envisionment. But if it's like super important, then they'll put the writer will make sure to put the details in there so that the directors know not to deviate from it. But
even then it might look a little different in the final product, because they're asking, oh, I want this silhouette, or I want this like detail on the shoulders or whatever, I want it to be a fur coat and that kind of thing. But the designer might put their own spin on it or put a little something extra. So
sometimes it's not even about that either, because if you guys have ever watched a cartoon or an anime movie that has a live action one, the costume is trying to mimic what the costume of the anime or the cartoon did, but sometimes it's just impractical and it just looks weird and bulky. Comic book movies do this too, where they change the costume to make it more realistic and actually fit the characters, because
easy to move around in.
Like I think Aquaman had the mantis or something like that, and it looked ginormous because they were trying to match the comic book as close as they could, but it just didn't
Wonder
look
Woman
real.
Like Wonder Woman's outfit, it still looked hella uncomfortable, but it looked a little more I guess maneuverable in some scenes than just the spandex riding up, that's everything. All I could think about reading those comics as a kid is like, doesn't that ride up when you, like, even Spider-Man commented about it, and like I think Spider-Man 2 or something, they're asking, that looks kind of uncomfortable. Yeah, it rides up sometimes, and so that's also another thing. We have to make sure that the characters can wear them for long periods of time. Like in The Witcher, they actually changed the design of a few to make it easier for him to like move around and do stunts in and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and they have to make sure that the actors are comfortable in them, they can wear them for long periods, and that they're practical to be used in whatever circumstance that the film needs it.
Yeah.
Costumes can also help show the emotional state of the character. So they might wear all dark colors because they are depressed, sad, moody, or mad, or they might wear very bright colors because they are cheerful, optimistic, happy, and bubbly. And so it can also show the state of mind of
in
the
this
characters.
case, the example you gave, like the second one, she's trying to be more serious, like what they would imagine a Harvard student being. So she's like, okay, serious people don't wear pink, right? Serious people wear black and darker colors and stuff, and glasses. And so she was trying to like look the part, as opposed to like the last one, you can see that, you know what, I can still look serious and still be feminine and still do what I like, wear the type of clothes that I like. So yeah, it's still a serious dress. It's a very elegant type dress, but it's pink and glittery.
And even the green one, you can see the difference between this green, it's a lot more dull. It's closer to brown. It's a lot darker compared to this green, which is a lot more glimmery and shiny and brighter.
Glary.
And so it
Yeah.
just shows the different color really helps to illustrate different emotions. So that is one way that we will.
Personalities too, like even with the darker colors, she still stands out. She still has to have a little bit of glitter. She still has to sparkle a little.
Right. So costumes can show growth and transformation of a character either gradually throughout the film or instantaneously. So they might learn a lesson and the next day they are wearing something else. They just came to terms with something in their lives that they've been rejecting for a while, and now they've come to terms with it. And so they can move on. And so they change the clothes. In this instance, like she was saying, she realizes that she can still wear pink and look professional without it having to be one or the other. And so she gradually sees, and everyone else starts to see in this movie, what is this, Legally Blonde?
Yes.
Everyone else starts to see in this movie that she can look good and still be taken seriously.
I still haven't gotten him to watch it, but we'll get there.
So costume designers have to think about all of these aspects, how the costumes will show what the character is going through without them saying a word. They also have to be sure the colors they use fit in or purposely don't fit in with the rest of the color palette of the film. So that is also something. It has to fit in and look visually. It has to visually look good with the rest of the scenic elements, the rest of the art department's stuff, whatever the set design is, the set dressing and all of that. You have to make sure that either it stands out on purpose, but most of the time they want it to kind of have that color harmony that we were talking about a few weeks ago, where it matches in some sense. So it looks good. It's not clashing and looking ugly in frame because it's just completely different and separate from the rest of the color palette.
And you can switch things up too. Like Elle wears multiple shades of pink, multiple different textures throughout the film. Like you can see, just because she wears a lot of pink doesn't mean that they all need to look the same. They don't. They look very different in each one. And I remember this scene of her going into Harvard and everything being brown and black and gray, and her walking up like the pink car and everything pink. But even then you could see like the different shades of pink. So even with like if you give a character one color, you can still play around with that color and still like make it unique to them and different shades and different textures and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and like Vish said, it can be used to show contrasting personality types or contrasting personality within the character themselves. If they start to change who they are, if they are changing it on purpose or not noticing, those are subtle ways to show the audience that they are transforming into somebody else, or that these two characters are just very different because their color scheme is completely different.
Yeah, like again, I'm sorry, but this is just a picture that's on the screen, so I'm using Legally Blonde as a reference. The girl that her boyfriend leaves her for has short brunette hair, because he said he needed to marry a Jackie, not a Marilyn. So basically, the blonde contrasting with the brown hair short girl with a totally preppy outfit, headband, dark clothes, and like to contrast the two different types of girls that he was with. And even in the lawyer scene, like towards the end of the movie, when she was in the room talking with the other lawyers, and she was all wearing black as well because that's what everyone else was wearing. And so up until that last moment in the courtroom when she was all in pink, when she was in that environment, she would try to dress like everyone else was dressing, until the professor made a pass at her, and then she was like, well, screw this. They just think I'm a piece of ass, as I just said. And then the transformation happens. So it was even subtle, and you don't really notice it. Like, at least for me, I only thought about it later on, and I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, like this scene, the second picture, was very obvious because she pointed it out, and she was and the movie pointed it out and made it like a big deal. But her wearing all black in the meetings with the other lawyers and stuff, I didn't really like pay attention to that much until later. And I was like, oh yeah, in those moments she was wearing all black and all dark colors and stuff. And she wore less and less pink throughout the movie until the end. And I didn't notice that until later. So.
And it helps show the theme that you can be feminine, but also be taken seriously. You can also do a serious role without having to lose your femininity.
Yeah. I love that movie.
So going into that, how many outfits the character has in the film, how many they wear throughout the film also says something about their character. It shows that they have either fashionable sense or they just don't want to stay in the same thing for too long. And so they're constantly changing how they look so that they can try to gain as much attention as possible. If one outfit's not working, they might change. They might go in the bathroom and change, it just depends on how attention needy they are or just how much they want to show off their different clothes and their fashion.
It also depends on what era we're talking about, because fashion back then was very black and white in the sense of like, oh, the peasants wore this, the nobility wore this. But as we evolve and as fashion becomes more expansive, especially now, there are different people can still care about their fashion sense and care about their appearance and have like an idea of fashion that they like without it being one particular thing. Some people like preppy fashion more, other people like goth, other people like hipster fashion. So that's another thing to take into consideration. Just because a character can still care about fashion and care about their appearance, and it show through different and have multiple characters that care about their appearance and still be shown in different ways, because one cares more about more this type of clothing and this type of expression, and the other likes this.
Right. Oh, Vish, do you have something to add? I saw you unmuted. Okay. All right. So where was I? Oh, so like Priscilla was saying earlier, costume designers also have to be sure that their costumes work for the film's purposes. So let's say we have a character that is going to fight in a wedding dress. So the material for an actual wedding dress isn't going to be used to have that fight scene because it's likely going to tear. A wedding dress is meant for obviously a wedding where they're walking down the aisle, they're standing in it, maybe they wear it for half a day, a whole day, depending on how long the wedding is, but it's not meant to be constantly worn. And if you were to wear a wedding dress for a long period of time, or if you were to get in a fight with one, it is very likely that you might tear part of it. And so if they are supposed to fight in a wedding dress, but the wedding dress isn't supposed to be ruined in the scene, the other thing the costume designer has to do is they have to create it to look like a wedding dress with different materials that are more durable and that will withstand the fight, that will withstand long periods of time being worn. And that is usually where they would make a hero wedding dress, where that's what the one for the close-ups, it looks the most realistic because it is a real wedding dress. Whereas the one that they actually use for the fight scene, when they do some more wider shots and things like that, there's a lot of movement, so you're not really paying too close of attention to the details. They'll try to match it as close as they can to the hero dress, made out of different materials that won't tear, so that continuity can be maintained.
Or if they have something that needs to tear, they might have a material that tears super easily. Like I forgot the name, but there's they do also make clothes so that when you push, it'll tear immediately instead of having to push and try to rip it and it, taking forever.
Yeah. And then like Priscilla said also earlier, the costume designer also works with the actors trying to make sure the costumes are as comfortable as they can make them. The actors are going to be in them for, depending on how long that character is in the costume. If the whole movie takes place in a day, in a story day, then they might be wearing one outfit the entire time. So that outfit should be comfortable enough so that the actor, because they're going to be in that for months, wearing that over and over again. And so they want to make sure that it's as comfortable as they can make it without ruining any of the other elements, like the the actual design of it, or the continuity or script story, or the character aspect of those costumes. But they have to consider all of that stuff together to try to make the best version of the costume and the most comfortable, that works with the story, is durable, and is going to withstand all of these different elements. So when designing the costume, they consider the story, what is happening with the character in that moment, the materials, and what would work based on what the character needs to do in it, and the look of the costume, how those materials will affect that. Like, different materials will look different. So if you're trying to make it durable, you have to make it look realistic as best you can. They'll think about the time period, the location, and the setting. So it may be based in China in the future. Well, Chinese future design probably isn't going to look the same as American future design. And so they have to look into both Chinese, maybe they'll look into some of the Chinese artists when they're creating futuristic stories, and look into what kind of design they've done, and then match that to something they think of when they're looking into researching all these Chinese aspects, to come up with a design that looks like it can fit in that setting and that location and that time period. They also have to think about the class system, if the character is dirty or clean, and more. They consider if the colors work for the story, the character, and the production design elements, and then what the budget is for their costume creations. So there's a lot to take into account with costume design, and when it's done well, we get engrossed into those characters and the film, and we can connect with them, or we can intentionally not like them based on not just their performance, but also how they are perceived through their costume. Does anyone have anything to add, or any questions or comments for that? Costume design, costume designers? All right, so moving on from that, we're going to talk about distribution, red flags, some of the scams, things like that. So let me get my notes. So before we jump into red flags and scams with distribution deals, I just want to preface this by saying that not every distributor is going to try to screw you over. There are some good distributors out there. However, they are all trying to get the best deal for them. Just as you should be trying to get the best deal for you as the filmmaker, it's a business deal. So there should be some negotiations and meeting in the middle, some compromises and things like that. However, there are also ones that are called like predatory distributors that go after new filmmakers that don't know what they're doing exactly, and they try to take advantage as much as they can. So there are some things to look out for. Also, some of the stuff that I've noted down isn't necessarily like red flags, but just some stuff to look out for to not get a bad deal. So some of it's not like a red flag that means you should run away from the distributor. It's just something in the contract that you might want to be aware of, so that you can try to negotiate it to get a better deal on your end. Because it's, for the most part, from a distributor, they're going to try to get the advantage on their side. They're going to have the weight leaning towards them, because they want to have the best deal for their company that they can get. And so you want to try to, but almost any good any good distributor is going to be able to negotiate with you, to work with you to try to get it down to an agreeable deal that you both agree with, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And lastly, I wanted to mention that adding on to pre-sales, we talked about pre-sales, I think it was Thursday. There's one thing I recently looked into that is what's called a performance bond. So specifically the part that is called a morals clause. And what a morals clause is, so this goes with pre-sales and some of the other stuff that you might get with a distribution deal, because I forgot, I just found out about it so I thought I'd add it. Morals clause is basically an agreement that the producer, director, main cast, and others, the main people in that production, sign, and typically a distributor wants in a pre-sales agreement. It will state that the people involved need to maintain a good public image, or the distributor or studio can terminate the contract. So it's basically saying, you know, don't do anything illegal, don't start doing drugs and getting high and going places and making a fool of yourself. Don't have any kind of sexual misconduct. Don't say any racial slurs or derogatory remarks online or to people in real life, or any recordings of you doing that stuff. Don't get overly drunk and do crazy things and be drunk all over the place and just be a mess.
Another thing is, if you do any of those things, your contract can be immediately terminated for because it will look bad on us as a production.
Yes, because it ruins their public image. It could ruin their public image as well, because it could affect them in two ways or more. One of them could be they could be viewed as a company negatively for working with that person. So why are you working with actor blah blah blah? They just beat up a person in a McDonald's or whatever. So why are you working with them? They're fighting with people all over the place. Or the second thing they could be is like the sales of the film could be affected because people don't want to see or support that person. Well, I'm not going to go see the new blank movie because blank actor just got in a fight and they seem like a scummy person and I don't want to support them. And so a distributor doesn't want any of that. They don't want to be viewed negatively because they're working with people that are viewed negatively. And they also don't want to lose sales by people not going to see a movie because they don't want to support the people behind it, the director, the actors, producer, all the main.
Of course, you also get to the point, unfortunately, where you have people that stuff came out about, and you've already finished production. You're already in the process of putting the movie out, and if you don't, that person, let's say, only has a few minutes in, like the Amber Heard situation, only has a few minutes in, and people are like very frustrated that, oh, well, I'm not going to watch this. But we also have to think about the fact that, like, unfortunately, at this point, not defending them, but at this point, they're, as a company, from a standpoint, a business standpoint, there's really nothing they can do because it's already finished. They'd have to, if it's like a pivotal scene, I don't know if it is, but if it is a pivotal scene, it's kind of hard for them to remove it. And then you're stuck with, okay, are we going to just shelve this movie that costs millions of dollars and people that need to get paid and all this stuff? Or are we going to have to bite the bullet and release it, maybe cut their scene a little bit, as much as we possibly can, and try to figure it out that way? Because sometimes it's not necessarily the company's fault. Sometimes it's just timing. It came out in bad, like the West Side Story situation with the Ansel Elgort allegations and all this stuff. So basically, sometimes it's not the studio's fault. It's like, oh crap, this leaked, we didn't know about it, and now it's too late to change it, or it's too late to do reshoots. So that's another really tricky, really hard situation that companies find themselves in. And it's not always 100% the company's fault. That's the only defense I'll ever give, stuff like that. But in that instance, as a business, I can understand that perspective of like, crap, we have to pay people. Like we can't change it. We can't completely remove that scene. We're stuck.
Yeah. And so to try to avoid this as best they can, to have the option to basically just cancel the whole thing, if you have a pre-sales agreement, especially, the distributor is going to have a clause in their contracts that allows them to terminate the contract in those instances. So if you are caught doing this, or that, then we are able to terminate the contract. It doesn't always mean they will, but it means that they have the option to if they feel like it's not worth it. Like Priscilla said, it depends, again, it also depends on how far in production it is and how much money they put into that production, I guess. And so
Yeah.
with the pre-sales, it doesn't really matter. A pre-sales is going to get terminated because they haven't actually put any money in yet. They just agreed to give the money once it's complete. And so pre-sales, they have really no risk of it getting canceled. They'll just cancel it straight out because they didn't spend any money yet. They just agreed to later, but the production company that was creating the film got in breach of the contract because the people in it started having a negative image.
Yeah, so sometimes that can be really tricky and hard for people working on the production that have nothing to do with it. But at the end of the day, those clauses are really important to protect the people in the company, yes, but also the people working on the project. So it's not always just like, oh, they're going to use any excuse to remove me. Sometimes it's just, oh, this is just a safety protocol so that we don't lose money and have to completely remove the project instead of being able to release it.
Yeah, and so in any contract you sign for media, especially pre-sales agreements and things like that, or distribution agreements, you'll probably come across a performance bond or morals clause. And that just means, act professionally. If your company that you're making this movie with gets found out for illegal accounting, something negative, we may be able to terminate the contract. If you, as the producer or the director or the main people in this production, the main people that are going to be named and seen above the line, crew and cast, if they are doing negative things, illegal things, whatever, and they're caught and you have a video of it, or they're going to jail over and over, or they're going to have a court case, whatever the case may be, they are allowed to then decide if they want to terminate the contract or make some adjustments and renegotiate to kick out a certain person and keep going if they want to do that instead. So that's what that is. All right, so go into distribution red flags and things like that. Goingbionic.com, they point out a few things to look out for that are not advantageous for the filmmaker in a distribution deal. So you want to look out for automatic extensions without performance in the contract. So each distribution deal has a term for how long that deal is going to last for. That could be 1 year, that could be up to 20 years or more. It just depends on how well established the distributor is and how long of a term they're trying to give it. The shorter the term is, the better it is for the filmmaker in general. The longer it is, the more it's locked up by that distributor, and you're not going to be able to sell it to a different distributor for those same rights, that same territory, until that term is up and that deal and that contract is expired with the current one. So with automatic extensions, if you're making a deal, let's say for a 5-year contract, make sure there are no clauses of automatic renewal or extensions, or you may actually be signing away the rights for much, much longer than 5 years. Because an automatic extension is going to say at that 5-year mark, it's automatically extended, and we're going to, basically we get to keep this contract going automatically. Typically, you do want automatic extensions in the contract, but you want to make sure that it's specifically mentioned that it's dependent on sales numbers and success level. That way, if a distributor is doing well with your product, your film, and they're meeting all the goals that you set out for them, then they can keep going, and this contract can just keep going without having to renegotiate and re-signing. It just automatically extends, and that's a good thing for both parties. But if they just want to have an automatic extension in there without it being based on performance, so it doesn't matter if we've sold your film at all, it doesn't matter how many people have, how much money we've gotten from this, we just get to keep it automatically and it's going to keep going, then that's a bad thing for you, because then it's basically like you're signing away a 20-year contract when in reality you thought you were signing a 5-year one.
I don't remember if this one was in the videos or if it's just in a previous video, but one thing they also said to look out for was if in the contract it states that like you can only show it on their platform, and if anything happens to their platform, you're kind of screwed because, well, you are only allowed to show it there. So like a clause stating like, oh, if this platform shuts down, I'm still allowed to distribute my work somewhere else.
Oh yeah, I'll get into that.
Yeah, okay, I didn't remember if it had it or not.
I got you. So yeah, look out for automatic extensions unless they're based on performance. If they're based on sales numbers and things like that, make sure that you agree to those sales numbers, that it's a good deal, whatever else. But if it's not, if there's no kind of verbiage in there that talks about it being determined on something, on some kind of success factor or sales number, then it's just going to automatically extend and automatically renew for them, and they're just going to keep the rights to your film after the contract is over. It's just going to automatically extend, so you're going to still be in a contract with them. The other thing to look out for is the distributor being able to sell the rights without approval by you to another sales company. So it's really normal to get multiple companies involved to distribute a film as wide as possible on as many platforms as possible. However, you want to be sure if the distributor is making a deal with another company with your film, that you get to overview it and approve or deny the final deal contract. Every deal is going to affect what you as the filmmaker are able to do with your film. So you want to be sure you agree and approve the terms and conditions. So it's called a license reassignment. So just look out for that. Make sure that, you know, you might want to give them access to that so that they can get other films involved, other distributors involved, but you don't want to give them full rights to do whatever they want. You want to be able to have final say, final approval of those rights. That way they're not signing away something that's not in your favor. You want a clause of some sort that states the distributor can't include your film in their assets. Oh, this is another thing. You also want to have some kind of clause of some sort in your contract that states the distributor can't include your film in their assets, in their assets in their balance sheet, if they file for bankruptcy. If you don't have something like that, then your film may be counted on their balance sheet and might be sold or gone down with them in bankruptcy if they end up going bankrupt. So you want to put some kind of clause in there that says, if you go bankrupt before our contract is done, I get my access back to my film. I get access to all rights and all content based on this film, this product, and it's not counted on your assets, because that will go down with their bankruptcy and they'll be happy to sold off to try to cover the debts and everything else in a bankruptcy situation. We talked about this one before, but you also want to put a ceiling on the amount the distributor can spend on marketing and advertising. That way they can't spend more than the film is worth and collect all the money as fees. So if they're trying to make a trailer and say that it's going to cost $70,000, you want to make sure that they're not doing that if you made the film for like $150,000, because then you're not going to end up making any money after the distributor takes their fee, their regular fee, like 20-30% for distributing it. They're also going to recoup their expenses, which they spent maybe $70,000 on. So now they're just recouping 70,000 plus 30% of whatever comes in. And you, with a $150,000 movie, you're probably not going to see huge amounts of money coming in. So you might break even in the film, but you as the filmmaker might not see like any of that money, because it's all going to those advertising fees because they charge so much. They spent so much on that stuff. And then, of course, you want to be sure the distributor makes money off the revenue of the film only. So if the film makes $100,000, they take their percentage and fees for marketing, and you get the rest. You want to absolutely make sure that they are not able to bill you with any costs that are not recouped. Because if you do that, if they have something in like that in your contract, that is one of the biggest red flags in a contract for a distributor. Something that shouldn't be done. Any sales agent or distributor should be making a commission, a percentage of the revenue from the money that's coming in. They should be taking on some risk that they believe in your film and they're going to distribute it and believe that they're going to make their money back. If not, if they spend money on these marketing fees and they have it in their contract that if the revenue doesn't add up to the amount they spent, they can bill you with the rest of it. Going back to that $70,000 thing, if they spent $70,000 on marketing and a trailer and artwork, and then the film only makes $30,000, they're going to take their 30% fee or 20% fee or however much it is for that specific deal. And then they are also going to take the rest out based on the costs that they spent. And if they have it in the contract that they're allowed to bill you the rest, that would be like what, like $40,000 that they're billing you after the fact because they didn't make the money back from distributing it and the revenue didn't come in. And so that is a big, huge red flag and something you definitely want to avoid. Make sure that they are making money on the back end. They're making money from the revenue, and that's it. They're not going to be able to bill you for any expenses. Whatever money they are putting in as the expenses, they're going to recoup from revenue and it being sold or watched on platforms and distributed in various places. So just keep an eye out for that. This comes from Film Courage. It's letter A in the syllabus. Red flags of a movie distribution deal by Mark, I think it's Heidelberger. He says he looks at the price they are trying to do for marketing costs. So that's what we just said. He likes to know what they are spending that money on, because he says that they don't stop until they reach that price point. Like if they are able to make the trailer for $10,000, but they have a deal for $70,000 in marketing, they're going to spend $60,000 on marketing somewhere else. They might do a bunch of Facebook ads and social media ads to quote unquote promote the film. And typically they do that so that they can make back all the money as much as they can. They want to try to make as much of the money as they can because unfortunately, what some of the distributors will do is they will make a trailer and they will overcharge it. They will basically say that it was 3 times the price, or they'll work with a friend or a company that's actually part of their company that does trailers, but it's actually part of their company. However, they are paying for that part of the company to make a trailer, and so they're allowing them to charge 3 times the normal price because in the end, it's all going to come back to their company. So knowing how much that company, the distributor, is trying to spend on marketing and advertising, and then being able to question them about it is always something you should do. Well, why are you spending $70,000? What do you plan to do with this money? And what is your strategy for marketing it? And then you can hear what they say and hear if you agree with it. Maybe it all makes sense and it's perfectly understandable, and your film is worth a few $1 million, then you might not be that worried about $70,000 of fees if it sounds reasonable and it sounds like, okay, yeah, that makes sense that you need to actually have this money to be able to do that. But in other circumstances, like if you made the film for $100,000, then like I said, it's probably not going to make too much more than its budget. You don't want to add on another whole budget worth of money for marketing. So then you got to be like, no, here's your marketing cap. You can only go up to $10,000 with your marketing. And if you can't get it, then we'll work it out. But you're not just going to spend $70,000 on whatever you want. Yeah, so like he said you really want a pretty low number for marketing for small independent films, because otherwise you are not going to see a return or recoup any of your losses. He says a standard term length for a distribution deal right now is about 7 years for independent films. If it's longer than that, that could be seen as a red flag, because you might not want them to keep it for that long. I've heard of other people saying that sometimes it's about 10 years. So I would say probably around 10 years. Anything longer than that, you might start being like either trying to negotiate it down, or it might be a red flag based on how big that company is. Now, if it's a huge distribution company and they're well established and they've been around and they have plenty of successful large films under their belt, then it's more likely they're going to want a lot more things. They have a lot more leverage. And that way you might sign away a 20-year deal because that company is well established. They pay on time and whatever else. So you can trust them. But with these independent distributors and these companies that are a little more not as well known, then you want to you have more leverage in that instance. They have more leverage. They have more leverage. One second. They have more leverage in the sense that they know the business a little bit better, but you have more leverage than you would in the situation with a much larger distributor that's well established. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I would say even with the larger distributor, though, if it's a huge plan, don't just take it right away because, oh, this means security. Like, also see if it's worth it in the long run, or try to make a clause like, oh, if you guys don't do this for me, at least like minimum, not too much, don't ask for too much because we're not in that position but enough to where you have some security too, and it's not just we own you for 10 years now type situation.
Yeah. You also want to watch out for, he says you also want to watch out for any verbiage in the contract that talks about rights to any sequels, because unless they're willing to put some funding into those, if there are going to be any future movies, which you don't know if you want to until you see how successful a movie is. So in the contract to distribute it, you have no idea if this film's going to be successful and it's going to go out to a wide range of audiences, or if there's going to be some interest in a sequel from audiences and from distributors and other film business people. Then you want to make sure that the distributor you're signing off with right now doesn't just automatically get rights to those sequels unless they say, we believe in this product, we believe that you can make sequels out of this, and if you choose to, we will pay so and so amount of money, or we'll just give more money to this contract here to get rights to distribute the next one if you make a sequel. So look out for them just automatically putting that in, like we get rights to any sequels, because unless they're giving a better deal for that, or they're giving some money, or there's some verbiage in there that they're going to help pay for it later if it's successful, then you don't want that. You don't want to be locked down with one distributor if you do plan to make a sequel. And even if you don't plan to make a sequel, you want the option to later on, and you want the option to be able to market it out to other distributors if the first one's successful, because then you have more leverage. But if you sign off a deal with one company for this one, and then you make a sequel and they have the rights to it, you don't have as much leverage because they already have the rights to that sequel. So that's also something to watch out for. Now, a red flag with some of the smaller companies, the unknown ones, or even ones that might be medium, like somewhere in the middle, if you're seeing any spelling errors and grammar mistakes, then that's a red flag, because they should have if they're a good enough distributor, they should have someone checking out for that stuff, lawyers,
basic knowledge of the English language
to make sure. Well, yeah, but like just any spelling mistakes at all, like they should have somebody reading
who
through
knows
these
how to
things,
type. Yeah.
reading through these things and fact checking and spell checking them.
Yeah, because it's one thing. It also shows that, oh, they sent this really quickly. Like sometimes I will send one and they'll have a few errors and I'll apologize because I was typing quickly or I was well, I can't see very well, so there's that. So hopefully, you know, the person doing it won't be blind, but basically, like if it has a bunch of errors, it shows that they either didn't proofread it, they either just sent it in a rush. Basically, they didn't put enough time into it to make sure that it was, you know, good.
It shows a lack of professionalism. So, you know, that is something to look out for. That's a red flag. Not necessarily I'm going to cancel this whole agreement thing, but
yeah, no, sometimes it happens, you know.
Yeah, especially depending on the amount. Like he was saying, you know, if you're seeing it over and over again, if you see like one spelling error, that's not really that big of a deal. But if you're seeing it over and over again, and then there's also grammar mistakes and stuff like that, it just shows that they didn't bring this contract through the proper channels and they're not as professional, and they might not know what they're doing as well as other distributors might.
Yeah, there's a difference between a typo and like multiple grammar mistakes and repeated instances of the same mistake over and over again.
Yeah. And then there's the huge, biggest red flag is the sense of being pressured into something without taking the time to look over it. You know, the predatory distributors that are trying to get people to sign off on this really crappy deal, they're going to lock them in for 20 years and they're going to be able to bill them for any expenses that are not coming from the revenue. And they're going to combine it with a bunch of films and try to just throw it at distributors and see what sticks. They will often try to pressure the filmmaker into being like, well, we only have 3 hours to make your decision, or, you know, something so small of a time that you don't even have time to look over the contract, and they'll try to pressure you into it. A timeline is normal, like having like, you know, give us your answer by so-and-so time, give us your answer by next week, by next month, whatever it is. That is normal. And that's just part of business dealings. And, you know, some distributors, if they want your film, they'll say, have it to us give your answer by next week. And if you like, I saw somebody say that they were like, well, we're not gonna be able to know by then. Then they were like, okay, we'll extend it. So some people just say that to try to get the ball rolling. But other
the average
companies
is a few weeks or a few months, never like a couple of days, basically. If it's
right.
a couple of days, you should feel like, if it's like, oh, we need the response by tomorrow or by 2 days from now, 3 days from now, then yeah, they're rushing you, they're pressuring you, and they're trying to make sure that maybe you don't read the entire contract or like they get a better deal.
Or you're not able to bring it to a producer rep or an entertainment lawyer to get it reviewed, because
or sometimes they're just desperate and rushing and they're not giving you time to negotiate either. Like it's not like a terrible contract, but it's not like a great one either. And they're like, crap, we don't want to give them time to even negotiate. These are our terms and that's it.
Right. So if they ever say something like, you get this deal, but only if you sign right now. And that is also something that happens. That's something that happens in many aspects, talent agencies and things like that. But with distributors, well, talent agencies too. If anyone's trying to pressure you into signing something right away without you even being able to review it at all, that is a huge red flag and most likely means they are scamming you or giving you the worst deal that you can get.
Yeah, so if you're looking for a manager or an agent and they're pulling that with you, yeah, no, heck no.
And it's most likely because they either don't want negotiations on the deal, like Priscilla said, or they just have some clauses in there that are not in your favor and it's way more favored on their side. Real deals, like I said, they might give a time that they want an answer by, but it's typically going to be enough time for you to overlook everything, review it, bring it to an entertainment lawyer, producer rep, sales agents, and just like make sure everything's good. They're usually not going to have such a short timeline that you're not going to be able to do any of that. So that is just that's the largest red flag you can get, is if somebody's trying to pressure you into a deal, then you might want to back away and just say no thanks, because it's not going to be in your favor. And a lot of filmmakers fall into it because they're afraid of not getting another deal. Maybe they've tried for a month or two to get a deal from somebody and it's not worked. And so when they finally get somebody to review it and start making a deal, they are so eager and afraid of not getting another one that they sign on to something quickly without doing the proper process of it, that they end up regretting it later. And usually they just lose their film and never see a penny. So they just spend all that money making the film and everything, and then they sign it off to somebody that's going to use some kind of accounting tricks and whatever else to make all that money go to the distributor, and none of it's going to be seen by the filmmaker. All right, so this next stuff comes from Black, I think it's Coppice Films, and it's a letter B, red flags of a film distribution deal. They say the same thing about the marketing cap. Find out what the distributor plans to do with the marketing cap, what they're doing with the trailer. Are they taking out a bunch of ads on social media, and which social media platforms are they going to do? They should be able to list what they plan to do. And if you don't think it's a sound strategy, you should be able to negotiate lowering the marketing fees.
Yeah, if you have someone that's just like, oh, leave it with us, we'll do everything, you don't even need to think, that to me would be a huge red flag, because it's like, no, it's my film. I want to know where you're advertising it, how you're advertising it, who you're advertising it to. I want to be able to be a part of this conversation. And yes, some people are like, oh, well, filmmakers don't understand, and blah, blah, blah. And that's, like I said, why a lot of people are afraid to work with new filmmakers. But that's why you show that you understand some of it, or you know what they're talking about. It's like, no, I understand some. And even if I don't, like, I'm learning about it. Hopefully you do, but like, just, I want to be a part of the conversation, and I want to be a part of the process. Don't let them phase you out.
Yeah, if you're able to have a producer rep, have an entertainment lawyer, especially, to be able to look over these things. And so then if you do feel like something is not quite right, they are saying, and usually, a company like a distributor is going to say stuff like that. They're going to be, even the legitimate ones, they're going to be like, well, we just know that this kind of stuff works. We know that this costs this amount of money, and we know that when we your type of film and your budget level and blah 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 blah,
because they will know more than you
that we come to, we know a little bit better of how to market this and how much money we need to market it. So you might want to do that, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be able to talk to somebody else and double check it. And even if it's a good sound plan, if it's going to end up being more money than it's worth, then you still don't want to take it. It's like, yeah, I understand that it's going to take $70,000 to make the best trailer, but I didn't have $1 million, $20 million, $100 million to make the best film quality. So I don't want to put that much money into the trailer, because then I'm not going to see anything returned to me, and that's just going to be, it's going to set me back because I want to work on another project later or something. So, and then if you are trying to negotiate a marketing fee and a company's getting defensive about it, or if they get defensive about any other type of negotiating, like they just don't want to negotiate their deal at all, and they're getting defensive, we know what we're doing, and this is the standard, that's a red flag right away. Because all these business deals are business deals, and business deals have a lot of negotiation to them. You might have the favor in their advantage for the most part because they're well established, but you still might be able to pull some things towards your favor, the most important things that stand out to you.
That said, though, I would like to make a caveat that you're also not supposed to be like, well, I want to know everything, and I want to well, I think this. They will know more than you about a lot, and you will have to learn and allow them to sometimes make a judgment call that you don't know a lot about this industry. It's not you taking everything, but you should be able to negotiate, and you should be able to ask questions and try to understand it better. And also they shouldn't be like immediately frustrated by you just asking questions like, oh, how does this work? How much is this going to cost? How, basic questions like price, or where is it going to go? How much is it going to cost? What are the
Even
rates?
people that know what they're doing, they still need to know those things. So like even if you've done 100 deals with distributors before, you still need to know what they plan to do with this production, because they might do 100 productions, but the other 99 are all different. They're from different filmmakers, different budgets, and different genres for different audiences. So it doesn't really exactly compute to the same exact deal. And that's why you have to know, well, what's your plan with this one? What's your plan with that? Well, why do you need this money? And like, if they're totally unwilling to even give you any of that information and just trust us, then it's a red flag. It depends on, obviously it depends how they're doing it, how they're going.
Yeah, I just wanted to make that caveat because sometimes it's the filmmaker that wants to like know everything, and like at the end of the day thinks he knows more than the distributor, and the distributor is kind of like frustrated because he doesn't really understand it or know or whatever.
Yeah. And one of the best ways for you as a filmmaker to understand and spot these red flags and bad deals, not just red flags, but just like something that's in their favor, is to do your research before you make your film. How much is this film able to be, what is the market buying a film like this at the budget level for? Talk to distributors and sales agents and stuff like that before you make it. If you can, get somebody on your film to help out and guide you along the way. And then of course, if you're able to bring it to a producer rep or a entertainment lawyer to check it out and kind of explain the things that you don't understand, those are the best ways you can really spot these bad deals and then make negotiations on it. Because otherwise, if you don't know what you're doing, you might think that $70,000 for, I keep going back to that, but it could be any amount. But let's just say 70 is still $70,000 for marketing and advertising is way too much. And they're obviously scamming me because you don't understand how much those things cost. So if you start actually understanding how much those cost, or you take it to somebody, a producer who's done it before, or a producer's rep, or an entertainment lawyer, and they can explain, that's pretty normal because this and that, this is how much Facebook costs, this is how much YouTube costs to advertise. And so if you break it down that way, that is why it's 70,000. And then you might see that it's, oh, okay, it's not a bad deal. It really depends on the budget level you have. And
also, you showing that that will really help them want to like work with you more and understand and try to explain more to you. Because one of the things that we heard a lot was that one of the reasons that they're afraid of working with new filmmakers is because they're afraid they won't know any of this and will just be really annoying or think they know everything, or like be really, oh, this is too expensive and stuff like that, and having to explain everything. So the fact that you go into it knowing a little bit and like, oh, what about like asking questions and using words and verbiage that they know, and they're like, oh, okay, this person knows, I can explain to them, and they'll be more open to trying to explain to you and having those conversations.
All right, so with red flags, you also, the Black Coppice films, letter B in the syllabus, they also say to check out the commission fees that the distribution companies around you take, because the one you're taking could be giving you a good deal, or it could be giving you average, or it could be giving you a bad deal. So you want to see the ones around you and how much they get, because all of them are going to do different amounts, different fees based on the area, the production, how much the budget is, and things like that. They could be, a 10% to 30% fee for their stuff. So any revenue that comes in, they take 10 to 30% off the top, and then they recoup their expenses, and then whatever's left goes to you. And then as more revenue comes in, they take their percentage and then they give the rest to you, or they just keep recouping their costs for the advertising and all that until they are fully paid back for what they spent. And then eventually the money gets back to you. So that fee that they take off the top could be 10 to 30% for a normal amount, but some try to charge anywhere from like 40 to 50%, which can be pretty crazy. 50% of all the money, and that's on top of taking out the costs that they put in for like expenses. So like they take 50, if you get $100 in from some streaming thing, and they're going to take $50, 50%, and then they're going to take, maybe they spent $30 on advertising, so they're going to take $30 off of that, and now you get $20 out of the 100. Whereas if they're only taking a 10 or 30% fee, you would get, $70 or $50 depending on what their fee is. So they're going to take back their expenses and they're going to recoup those costs because they are putting money into advertising and marketing it. Most distribution companies anyway. Some don't do anything with marketing. They just post it up to, they just sell it pretty much, but they don't really market it out to anybody. But if they are doing that, they are going to recoup their costs. If they're the ones making the trailer, the more work they have to do, the more it's going to cost you in the long run through revenue. But it's also money that you don't have to put up front to get it done. Like if you had to make the trailer yourself, you have to find a way to pay the people to make it out of pocket before you can give it to the distributor. Whereas if you give it to the distributor and they're doing the trailer, they're just going to take it out of the revenue. And so it's usually a better deal, but it depends on how much money you have and what's worth it to you. Anyway, you also want to really watch out for so watch out for any giant fees, distribution fees. Those are going to be, a normal one, like I said, is 10 to 30%. I've heard around 20 to 25% is pretty average. Whereas, 45 to 50%, unless it's international, that's really high. If it's an international distributor, then it makes more sense. They usually take a bigger cut because they're doing a lot more stuff, distributing it to different territories and things like that. So it's more money. But if it's just a distributor in your country, then 25, 20%, maybe 30%. But anything higher than that starts to get into that's a little bit too expensive area. You also want to watch out for any guarantees that they give you. So if they say, I guarantee this film is going to make at least $1 million. So, 50% won't be that much since you're going to get a large profit anyway. Or I guarantee if we put $300,000 into marketing, we're going to make a larger return. I guarantee you'll want our business to automatically extend these contracts. It just makes things easier to have it automatically renewed. No one should be guaranteeing you anything. Nobody knows anything. Even if it's a huge film, there's hundreds of millions of dollars, all sorts of huge actors in it. Nobody knows if it's going to be successful or not. So any kind of guarantees like that, I guarantee I can get you on Netflix. No, they can't, because they don't know if Netflix is going to buy it or not. So guarantees are a red flag. They shouldn't be guaranteeing you anything. They might tell you like, we believe if we do this and that, we can get it on Netflix, or we believe it can be worth this much. That's okay. But if they're saying we guarantee it, so give us a better deal because it's going to be worth it to you, red flag. Either negotiate that deal down or just skip out on that distributor altogether. Letter D in the syllabus, distribution and sales agents for red flags. I think it's Bassetti Law Firm is the name. They say if a sales agent or distributor asks for an upfront fee, that's also a red flag. Producer reps may ask for upfront fees, and that's not a red flag. So a producer rep usually gets on the film earlier than the others, and they're usually helping to guide through it. They're kind of just a producer in a sense, and they represent you for your film. They're a local sales agent. So whatever country you're in, a producer rep will represent that film in that country. And that's their title means that. And they usually do take some kind of upfront fee to do their work. But a sales agent, which is an international sales distributor or agent to sell it to distributors, or a distributor, they should not be asking for an upfront fee. They usually are going to be taking it from the back end. They're going to be taking money from the revenue. If they're asking for an upfront fee, then they're not really putting any risk in at all on their side because they are getting paid to distribute your film. And in a lot of instances, if your film is good enough, if it has big enough names and things like that, you might even get a minimum guarantee, which is money that the distributor or sales agent gives to you and guarantees you get to keep this money, even if we end up not making this amount back. So them asking you to give them money up front, huge red flag. We also talked about this earlier in the semester, but also watch out for sales agents or distributors that deal with quantity over quality, especially if they have a lot of unsold films, because then they might just put your film in with a big bunch of them and try to sell it on some platform, or just, here's all the stuff I have, check it out and see. They're not putting as much work into your film specifically, and it doesn't work out as well if they're not focused on selling your film. They're just focused on selling a film in their library. So watch out for that. If they're dealing with a lot of stuff that they've not sold and they just have a bunch of films and products that are in their library but have never made it to anywhere, you might want to avoid those. If a distributor or sales agent comes to you, that's also a red flag. I mean, unless it's like a film market or a festival where they've seen the film, then they might approach you. But if they are just emailing or calling you out of nowhere, it's definitely a red flag. In this industry, you have to approach and reach out to them. There's plenty of films and projects being made to where legitimate distributors are getting so many deals that they have to weed them out quickly. They weed out some through email, then they weed out some through seeing the trailer or seeing the artwork, and then the trailer, and then they weed out based on IMDb credits and whatever else. Because they have so many submissions coming in, they can only work on so many at a time. So for a company to go out and reach out to a filmmaker before they've even shown it anywhere, like it just means that they're probably a company that's going through social media and stuff and finding your film based on some kind of algorithm word that you put in, like making a film or whatever social media post you might have done 5 months prior. And they are trying to get you to sign a deal or do something where it's not going to be in your favor. So they shouldn't really be coming to you. You should be going to them. And then I already said this, but if they guarantee you anything, he says this as well. If they guarantee you anything, they shouldn't guarantee anything because nobody knows what's going to work and what's not. This next stuff is from filmpro.com. Actually, filmproproductivity.com. It's the letter J in the syllabus. They say they had a friend of theirs that signed with a sales agent, and that agent made some agreement with a similarly named company. The movie made money and the filmmaker went to collect their share, but the sales agent didn't have the money because the money was going through the similarly named company and the filmmaker didn't get anything. So that's why you want in the contract that any further deals have to be approved by you, where they can basically give like 100% away to another company. And based on them being so similarly named, it probably just means that those two companies were run by a scam artist pretty much. And when they signed the deal with one of them, they probably owned both companies, and then they basically sold the rights to the third party, which was their other company, that they get all the rights and the revenue. Because in the contract you initially signed with them, it didn't have any clause that said that you get to approve or deny the deals further. The sub distribution is what it's called. So they sub distributed it to their own company, but it was a separate company, so it's legal. And then they gave all the rights and the revenue to that separate company, or they just had that separate company say that their fee was 80% of the revenue. And so that company gets 80% and they get their 20%, filmmaker gets nothing. So that is definitely something you want to look out for. And why you always want to research these companies, anybody who's worked with them before and has been represented or distributed by them. You want to talk to them and say, hey, how was it? Was the deal good? You know, because there are things like that. And that is a definite scam that you want to avoid is something sketchy and shady like that. Also look out for any verbiage or clauses that state a distributor gets money and fees for anything they do. So for instance, if they make Spanish subtitles for the film, you don't want to have to pay them fees if you later sell the distribution rights to another company in Latin America. So you give the film to the distributor goes ahead and makes Spanish subtitles for, you know, American Spanish speaking individuals. And then you're trying to sell the rights to Latin America and you go ahead and use those Spanish subtitles. If in the contract it has that they get some percentage of the fee because they're the ones who made those subtitles, you're going to have to pay them anytime it's shown through the other distributor in Latin America. You should have what's called a free access term, will allow you to use whatever they've made for free. You get free access to the stuff they make for the film when selling it to other territories and things like that. So that's something else you want to look out for. Free access. Whatever you make for this film, whatever promotional material you're doing, I get free access to it. So I can also use it to sell it to other distributors for other territories, other markets, and whatever else. You also want to try to get audit rights in the contract. So that would mean if you choose to, you can go and audit their books, their finances, and make sure that they are paying you fairly and accurately. If a distributor doesn't want this, it's a red flag. So if they aren't doing anything shady, then there's not really anything to hide after all. I would say this really depends on how big the company is. You know, if you're distributing with, let's say Universal. Universal is big enough to where they might not want you to look at their books because they don't want you to see what they're doing with other productions and leak anything. So they might be totally against giving you access to something like that. However, if it's just like a little independent distribution company or a medium-sized one, they should have no problem let you looking over the accounts and making sure that everything is accurate. Because if they are paying you fairly, if they're giving you the amount that they say they will, then you checking up on them isn't going to affect them in the slightest. It's just going to, here you go, check it out. You look through it, you go, okay, everything looks good. Thank you. But you do want to have those rights in there so that you do have the ability to look through it if you sign with somebody. So audit rights. And I think that was it. We'll talk more about distribution on, I think it's Thursday, where we're talking about distribution negotiations, which is kind of this same stuff, but more talking about just some things to look out for. This was mainly like red flags and scams you want to try to avoid as best as possible, or just really bad deals that aren't in your favor. The negotiations will go into more details about some of the other things you might find in contracts. But does anybody have anything to add? Any comments, any stories you've heard of people getting ripped off and any kind of scams that I didn't mention?
I mean, I mentioned to you guys a while ago about the extra with the 8-page contract.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so definitely, I mean, you guys preach this a lot, just you have to read it and go through it. But that's part of their angle, is like they're gonna, slam you with a 10-15 page contract, and you're automatically like, oh, I don't want to read that. And so your first instinct is to just go ahead and sign, because they're gonna put it there and they're gonna sit there and look at you, but at the end of the day, it's your deal. So if you got to sit there and read it, and however long it takes you to read it, like, make sure you read it, because you never know what could be in it. I've been in the military for 6 years, and everybody's contract is similar but different.
Right.
Let's see, they do things like they have and this is, I'm not throwing any negativity towards the military or anything like that, but they do things that so when you sign on, like they offer you a bonus. Like me, I had a $20,000 bonus, and there's stipulations to it that they don't really tell you once you sign it. And the stipulations are, well, if you get this bonus, you can't work federally or something like that, or else you lose the bonus, or you can't switch jobs or something, or you lose the bonus. You have to give us the money back. There's always some kind of stipulation that they put in there. That's just the military, but it's something similar along those lines with the film stuff too. It's like you got to pay attention to the stipulations, and then some things can be worded funny to get you in or out of trouble. Like for me, like that actress I was telling you about with the 8-page contract. My biggest thing, like, I was willing to sign had she had taken some of the things out that she was infringing on infringing herself into my movie by some of the things that were in the contract. Like, she wanted creative control over some things. She wanted the right to sell merchandise on her own, which, like I've explained to you guys, like, I wasn't trying. This film isn't really, it's a short film, and it's my, my warm-up film to get back in. So, like, but in the event that, maybe big Hollywood or
Even
some
so, that's not supposed to be like an act. That's not supposed to be in an actor's contract.
big actors, like big time actors, like talking about Comic Cons, the last meeting. So a part of their like a lot of big time actors, they'll have that. They'll make sure that's put in there, because that's a part of their livelihood. Like I was saying, like the Power Rangers, like they go around and tour. That's what they do. Like, when it gets, that's and it's pretty cool, because a lot of people, like a lot of actors that take on like sitcoms like Family Matters or Power Rangers.
A big franchises, but not a short film, right?
Jobs like that, because jobs like that, you've heard, like, you never see like Steve Urkel, like he doesn't do anything outside of Family Matters, because it's kind of hard for him to find work outside of that show, because he's been typecast or whatever. So part of that is like, okay, well, after I do this, like they have a talk, like after I do the show, the chances of me finding work is going to be hard, unless that, and there's things in the contract that prevent them from doing other, certain things, because they don't want to tarnish the image of, the show. So, like, I think Bill Cosby had a thing with Lisa Monet when she was doing the Cosby Show. Like, oh, you can't, it's in her contract, she can't do this specific movie while she's on the Cosby Show.
That's ironic.
Yeah. Yeah,
sad but ironic.
They put things in the contract, and then you hear about the horror stories with Britney Spears and some of these child actors that are really bound to their parents when they get into the celebrity world, and they have these contracts with their parents, and it's terrible that these parents are like still using. Britney Spears is older than I am, and nobody knew that she was still like in that clause, but that happened.
But that is really hard in like those types of contracts, especially because a lot of those exploitative contracts you do early on, like you get it early on in your career.
And if the kid, you're a child, like you don't pay that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also wanted to add to that with distributors, they do not want to see, unless it's a really big actor or a big name director or producer or something that's going to help sell the film, they do not want to see any contracts with certain crew that's just going to like let them have either continuous revenue from some kind of percentage of the profits or anything that gives them sort of, like you said, like creative control over any of the elements, because then the distributor, when they take it on, they have to pay out all of those revenues if that's the contract, or they have to,
Especially when it's early on, I would imagine.
and so they're not going to take on a contract that has somebody say that isn't big enough to have reasoning for it, you know.
That's where, and that's what I was going to get into. So like I was saying with the Power Rangers cast, so it's like, you never see those guys in any other stuff because it's kind of hard for them to find work. So what they do is in their contract they have it set up like, hey, like I can have some kind of creative rights over this character, so I can sell T-shirts, I can sign autographs under this character's name and stuff, and make money that way. So like they do the tour. They'll charge like $20 for an autograph, $50 for an autograph shirt and stuff. And that's how they make money outside of that. And they just go around doing that, which is cool. And that's what this actors want. But I was just like, your background, But if I were to sell that film or my film or did type of a negotiation with Netflix or HBO or anybody, her contract is there. So I would have to, like you said, either buy it out or renegotiate, or I'd have to give it to them. And then, but at that point, they don't, like you said, they don't want to hear that. Like, oh, these actress has contracts. Oh, she's a background actor. So now we have to buy out the background actor. Like, they don't want to hear that type of stuff. So you can get screwed over on both ends, either on the filmmaking side and the talent side. So no matter what side you're on, just read the contract.
Yeah, read it, make sure you agree with the terms, conditions, and the deals. And if you don't understand it, find somebody who does. Entertainment lawyer if you can. Producer rep if you can. If you can't get an entertainment lawyer, an entertainment lawyer should really be used for contracts if you can get them. And if not, there are ways to get free law advice, which we talked about earlier this semester. But try to find a way to get somebody who knows better than you, understands the language, to read it if you don't understand what it's saying, because some of it can be intentionally confusing to try to get you to not realize what it's saying, like what it entails. So always pay attention to that and try to, if you don't understand something, try to bring it to somebody who can help show you what, or let you know what it means. All right, so moving on from that, we're going to talk a little bit about production, television, shooting schedules. And this was actually really tough to find answers to. Like I said, TV, it's really hard to find a lot of information because there's not too much out there. Independent people can't really do it. So it's not a lot of independent people sharing the information of what they've learned. And so because of that, there's not too many answers for some of this stuff. So I only have a few sources on this, and take it with a grain of salt because I'm not sure. I like to believe stuff when I can find plenty of sources that are saying the exact same thing. But when I can only find a few that are saying it, one or two, then I'm kind of like, it could be this or maybe not. So most of the sources that we did have were saying that it takes about 8 shooting days per 1 hour episode of a single camera drama. And typically about 8 to 10 months for the shooting season. So when they're shooting a season of a show that are 1 hour episodes, they'll be shooting it for 8 to 10 months, and they will have about 8 days per episode to shoot it. They say about 5 days, about 5 shooting days, maybe a Monday through Friday, for a 30-minute episode with a single camera. 8 to 12 hour days is generally how long the days go for. And some, depending on the TV show and like if it's a sitcom or if it's something else, they may do like 5 days a week, having weekends off. I've heard sitcoms usually set it up this way, kind of like a regular job. If they can, they try to get it like that, give people weekends off. But it really depends on the show, if they're behind on schedule at all, how many episodes they have to get done. So a sitcom could have 22 episodes a season or something, and they might just not have enough time to get off. So they might do 6 days a week schedules. It really just depends. Also, a lot of people are saying they have longer days depending on the TV show and the episode. They could do 14 to 18 hours, depending on if they're behind or need to wrap up a scene or an episode before they finish the day. Many of the sources stated that sitcoms with multiple cameras are shot in about 4 to 5 days per episode. So I think maybe with the live studio audience thing, maybe they only see a few scenes filmed, but not the whole episode, because that would make a little bit more sense than it all shot in a 5 or 6 hour day, like I thought before. If they shoot it a few scenes in front of a live audience for the episode, and they shoot the few scenes in front of another live audience the next day until they get the episode done, it takes about 4 to 5 days to get done. It makes sense, but I'm not entirely sure on that either. Either way, it's a really quick process compared to film, where film would have maybe 3 months of shooting for an hour and a half to 2.5 hours of content of the film. Sometimes more, and they cut down some scenes, obviously, but nowhere near as much content as they're going to shoot with a TV show, where an hour-long thing is done in 8 days, or a 30-minute thing is done in 5 days. That's a lot quicker of a turnaround, which is why those long days happen, where it's 14 to 18 hours. Someone said their longest day was like 22 hours long, because they were finishing up the last episode of the season and the actor had to leave the day after. And so they just had to keep going until they got it. And that is why in the unions, you'll have those rules of like double time starts, I think it's after 12 hours, and time and a half starts in between. I think it's 10 to 12 hours is you get time and a half, and after 12 hours you start making double time. But anything less than 10 hours, maybe it might be to 8 hours, and then you start making time and a half until 12 hours, and then you make double time, something like that. But either way, it's so that if it's to kind of try to make the production companies and the studios shorten the days somehow, so that they're not spending double the amount of money just to keep people there for super long hours. Because otherwise, if it was the normal pay, they would just keep them there for 30 hours at a time, just because they can. But if anyone has any, that's kind of all the information I got on it. So I'd say 8 to 10 months for a season of a show, depending on what it is. And shooting weeks, maybe about 5 days, sometimes 6, and then they get 2 days off here and there. A lot of shows, sitcoms will try to do weekends off, Monday through Friday shooting, or they might do Tuesday through Saturday shooting with Sunday, Monday off. And their days go from 10 to 12 hours averagely, but can go up to 14 to 18 hours depending on the production.
8 to 10 months sounds about right, because from the schedules that I've seen, they will start production on season 2 about 3 to 6 months after season 1, like either before or after season 1 aired, depending on if they got renewed or not. And then they'll end it about 7 to 8 months later. So I think that makes sense. From what I've seen, but it probably varies, because shows have different times and different number of characters, and
it's also I was also reading that it's changed Recently, because of streaming services and everything, it's changed. It used to be you have certain like seasons of like pilot season when all the episodes would come out, and if it got picked up, it would start being in production in a certain time. I think they said somewhere around like May is when they would get together and do like it was either writers or producers or something would get together and they would start doing either ideas or shows. And so that's where you would like pick your teams from, because everybody was available around the same time. And that was when these networks were trying to get content for their next year of television, because it was live, or not live, but it was like you had to have enough content to fill all the slots. But now with streaming, the teams can be picked up at any time. It can start shooting at any time. And so it's changed a lot. And that's probably another reason why it's kind of hard to find some of the answers. And like Priscilla said, it probably depends on how long the show is, when it started, how many scenes it has, how many episodes it has, and all of that. But generally speaking, I would say it's a good estimate, 8 to 10 months for the season. Does anyone have any
because
insight on that?
I've heard actors talk about like, oh, we were shooting for like 6 to 8 months in Toronto, and then we came back, and then it aired, and then we'd have like 3 to 6 months off, and then we'd have to go back and shoot again.
Right, and that's also why if you are having, if there's a season airing, they are already done with the show most of the time. When an episode is airing, like the only time you might still be in production when something airs, I think they said it was either broadcast or cable. One of those or both will sometimes have so many episodes. I think broadcast because like 22 episodes or whatever. And so sometimes because they have so many episodes, they'll start airing an episode of the show before the last one's done. And they'll be somewhere in the middle of production. Sometimes they'll finish up, they said even like a few hours before it's needed on the air. So sometimes the schedule is like very close with the broadcast and cable. Whereas with other shows like streaming services and things, you most of the time will finish up all of the episodes before you start seeing them air. And so if people have any complaints and like, oh, this character is like this, I wish they were like that, or this writing something, I don't like the storyline, whatever it is, they usually can't really get to it because they've already started in production for the next season. So they usually don't get to those story points and hear the feedback and start working on the feedback until like a 2 seasons later, because that's just how the production works. While it's airing, they are getting ready. They are prepping for another season. And then once they get the green light,
filming, because some shows, they are automatically renewed for a second season, then they will be in production for season 2 while season 1 is airing.
Exactly. So then they can't really, obviously the writing is one of the first things that happens. So you can't rewrite stuff. There are rewrites, but it's harder to do when you're currently in production to answer feedback and make the show different based on feedback that you're getting. So that is sometimes why it's kind of lagging behind in those areas. And then it starts to catch up later and change based on what people are saying that they want. If the network and the showrunner believe that will help the show in the long run, or if it's just like, no, that's only a few people saying it, we're going to keep doing what we want. So it just depends on the people too. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or anything to add, any insight or knowledge in that area? All right. Moving on from that, we're talking about a TV show Bible. We're also going to talk about mood boards and lookbooks in a minute. First, we're going to talk about TV show Bible. So TV show Bible is a pitching document that's used to help sell your idea for a TV series. It's also used in production to keep everybody on track for some of the elements within the show, like the characters, the episode outlines, and things like that. Studios and networks might like a pilot script, but they want to know if this story can be spread out into a series. So this stuff comes from studiobinder.com. I believe it's, I don't know if it's in the syllabus. Oh, you know what? That's shooting schedules, no wonder. All right, Studio Binder, letter G. So TV show Bible examples. So a TV show Bible can have information about the world of the series, the characters and what they're like, as well as episode synopses after the pilot. I'll go to that in a minute. So you give the pilot episode, studio likes it, but they're like, okay, but how are you going to turn this into a season? Why does it need a season? Do you even know what's going to happen after this story? And so a TV show Bible will help to show, like, this is kind of the outline or the general idea of episode 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then if you get another season, you have a basic little outline of maybe like, and this is what could happen if we go even further. And this is what could happen if you want to do a spinoff. Basically, you're just giving as many ideas as you can, as like, this is the setup. This is what we have planned and our overall vision of this thing. And if you want to, here's how you can spread it out even further with different shows, spinoffs, or, maybe they talk about merchandising, and basically just trying to get the studio to be like, okay, I see that we can make money.
Even later seasons, like, okay, where is this going to? Like, okay, this is our main premise. And then they might ask, okay, where do you see this going? How can this become market? Like, what will make people want to keep watching? What are the cliffhangers? That kind of thing.
Exactly. And they'll outline some of that stuff and show it. So they can include a one-page pitch of the show as a whole, and or a log line. Log line's just like a 1 to 2 sentence description of what the show is. Or a one-page pitch would be basically a one page of maybe 200 to 300 words about the show as a whole. And they can also briefly mention what the future seasons would be about. Like I said, it's used as a way to illustrate the vision of the show as a whole, and not just one episode like a pilot script. Because if you get a pilot script and it's amazing, but the showrunner doesn't really know what to do after that, it's going to start showing in the season. And also, if it's a really good script, but it's kind of like, well, where do you go from here? The studio or the network really wants to see that and see what you have planned for the future.
I was going to say, especially if you have a show that has, starts with this cliffhanger, and we start on this mystery that's not solved yet. They want to see where you're going with this. Hopefully. So that they know, okay, where's it going to go? Or is it just going to be a show that's constantly having a bunch of like cliffhangers and stuff with no payoff? Like, what's the end goal of this character, or where do you
what's the character arc?
Yeah,
Or like, this happens to them in episode 1. What happens to them in episode 2? If it's a linear story, not all shows are going to be linear. Yeah. Some of them are going to be like sitcoms. A lot of sitcoms, they might sort of hint at stuff that happened in the past, but a lot of them will just have one episode being almost completely detached from the other, with a few elements intertwined. But for the most part, you'll just see, like, what are your episode ideas in that instance. But if it's a continuous story, they want to see, it doesn't have to be long. It's usually just like a little short paragraph of what the next episode is, but they want to see that you have an idea for what is going to happen next. So this stuff comes from industrialscripts.com. The article is TV Show Bible. The arcs, tone, style, structure, themes, world, story, and characters will all be demonstrated in a good show Bible. Bibles can also be used continuously after a show has been on screen. So again, they might go back to it to any new writers that come on and things like that, they might show them this Bible to say, here's what we've done, or here's the episodes that we've created, and here is what we plan to do, so that they have a better sense of the series. They say it should be updated with any new characters, locations, and any other changes that happen. So if you had an episode idea for episode 2, and then you do episode 1 and you realize that you want to, I'm going to mute you, honey. You have an episode idea that you thought you wanted to do, but then when you start writing it, you want to change it. Then in production, somebody would be updating it, making sure that they keep track of any new characters that appear that weren't in there previously,
Sorry,
any
I thought it was
locations, and any other changes that are made to those episode ideas or anything else, so that everybody's keeping track of what's happened and what they plan to have happen next. It's often the job of what's called a script coordinator or any of the writer's assistants to know the ins and outs of the show Bible during production, I mean. They help maintain the consistency as the show progresses and things become more complex, because the more episodes and storylines you add, the more and more complex it gets, and you really want to keep everything, you really want to remember everything that's happening. And this is a really easy way to just quickly glance over the episodes instead of having to watch the whole thing or read the entire script of the show, of the episode. As long as it has enough detail about what the main things that happened, then you'll have a better idea to just quickly look through it and remember what has happened so far and what you did have planned or what you do have planned for the future of the show. Show Bibles are, like I said, they're also given to new writers on a show so that they have an idea about where the character's narrative are. And so no 2 show Bibles are going to be exactly the same, because each show should be unique in some way or form. They usually make their show Bibles different in a way. Some might make it a bit more professional. This is Battlestar Galactica. Theirs was all text. So it's a little bit more professional or standard with just text about the visual, about what this is. This is their pitch, talking about what their goal is with this show and what they think it's like, whatever else. They describe that in the pitch, the first page basically of the pitch. Others, this is from the Adventure Time one. This is I think like a page down or something, but it kind of shows more images, concept art, and it writes it in the style of the TV show. So, you have the big what at the top, and that's more like the characters Finn and Jake. And they have the little text bubbles saying what time is it, Adventure Time, and they do that all the time in the show. And so this one, they decided to write it in a style that was more reminiscent of the show. Personally, I really think it comes down to what you're trying to create, the genre, and if it needs illustrations to help convey the look and feel you're going for. I do think that illustrating the concepts I would say it's a really good benefit, because it shows the idea you have in your head illustrated, because it's going to be film, so it's going to be a visual medium. So showing as close to film as you can get, pictures or audio, but in this instance, pictures, you can show what you're going for, what your ideas are, so that they can get a better sense of what it is. But that's not to say you have to have illustrations. Battlestar Galactica and other shows I've seen with their TV show Bibles, they just did all text. As long as you're describing the characters, the setup, why this show can go on for more seasons than just one, or why it can go on for one season instead of just having a good pilot episode. That's what this document is for. The main purpose of a show Bible is to illustrate your show. This is why, for the most part, no 2 show Bibles are alike. You want
also if you want a mini series, why it should go on for only 10 episodes or so.
Right, why it has that wrap up and everything like that.
Yeah.
TV show Bibles have Oh, but you want it to be unique and different because your show should be unique and different. It shouldn't be exactly the same. You can start with a template and then work from there to kind of create your own unique aspect on it, like adding different things about it. Maybe the template starts with 3 characters, but you have your show being about 6 characters. So you need to add in 3 more characters, just simple little things like that. But obviously that's one of the changes you need to make. But there's other ones like the style and the way it's uh, illustrated, the way it's formatted. Those things can all be unique to your show based on what your show's about and how you want it to come across. TV show Bibles have no set minimum or maximum length either. I would say trying to keep it condensed is often the best way to go. Average sizes look to be around 15 to 30 pages, but they can go anywhere from 5 to 100 pages. So it just depends on how much information you're trying to shove in there. To me personally, I would say keep it condensed as much as you can. You don't want somebody getting bored reading halfway through or just look at it and be like, holy crap, this is so much, and have like a daunting task of reading 100 pages, because that might lessen your chances of getting approval for that show to be made. Whereas if you have it condensed down to 30 pages or 15 pages, you have a much higher likelihood that somebody's going to look through it and actually read through it and see what the show's about. So this website, screencraft.org, actually has quite a bit of TV Bibles from professional shows, 21 different ones. I think the best way to get a better picture of creating one, if you're planning to make a TV show at all and you're trying to figure out how to pitch it, this is one of the tools you need to use. And the best way to figure out how to do it is reading ones that were made successfully for other TV shows. This one has some of them, and obviously doesn't have all, but like the Adventure Time and Battlestar Galactica pictures I actually got from here. And so you can just look through and see what they did, how they did it, like with Lost, what was theirs like. Their title's a little bit different. It looks like it's in the sand. That's part of the show. Island. The lettering is sideways. And then some of them will give like a table of contents to say, this is what's in here, so you can skim through it if you like. And then they go in and they kind of show what this could be like. They just show a little island and and they just basically on theirs, I thought it was interesting because they're kind of just like, we're not really sure what we're doing with this, but we're going to do our best. So here's our best shot at a blueprint. They're just like being honest. They're like, we've never really made one of these before, but we're going to try and see how it goes. So thanks for reading this. Thanks for taking the time, blah, blah, blah. Some can do that. Some other ones I've seen where they keep it as professional as possible and they keep it aimed at the show only. And other ones try to have it sound like one of the characters, like that Adventure Time one. And so it really just depends on what you want to do with it. You can get creative with these things. Getting creative with marketing and distribution, pitching and all that is really helpful for you to be able to show that you're creative and to get a better deal in a lot of these cases. Last thing I'll say about these television show Bibles is they're not really needed in film. And the reason why is because film can stand on its own. Unless you're trying to make a series of films, if you're just trying to make one film, the script should speak for itself. You can have some concept art and you can have some other things to show what it's going to look like, but they don't have to go, well, where is this going to go from here? Whereas a TV show, if you send in the pilot script, they need to know, all right, why does this need more episodes? What's your plan? What about other seasons? How many seasons are you thinking? Things like that. I think in the Stranger Things one, they even said that even though this is meant to be an 8-episode story and then wrap up, we do believe that we could do a second season. And they said like the kids could be a little bit older, they'd be back in the town, and this is how season 2 would be if you choose to do that. And then obviously, they got another season, but their first thing was just saying, this is mainly a 8-episode story, and if you want to go further from there, you can, but here's what this 8 episodes is about, and here's what the possibilities are if we choose to pursue a future season. Does anyone have any questions, comments, anything to add about TV show Bibles? All right, well, I would just recommend, if you were trying to pitch a TV show, I would not every single one does these either. So you don't absolutely need one, but it does help. I say it helps a lot because it gives you the show. Some networks and studios are gonna require it or request it, and others are gonna just be like, they don't require it. But I would say having it is a better chance of you getting picked up.
Muito jogado, meu Deus, tá horrível.
What?
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say, so would you describe it like kind of like this lookbook would be somewhat of a storyboard meets what's the word I'm looking for? So it's somewhat of a storyboard meets shot list situation as well.
I would say it's more of an outline of the season and some of the image. Like in Lost, they didn't know what the actors were going to look like. So what they did is, as you can see, all the actors are blacked out because they're like, that's a you can see it's a girl, you can see it's a guy, you can see it's a shape of a human, but they're not trying to give any impression of what these characters look like because they don't know. And so then I thought it was interesting, like they do Jack and they do Kate, and it's just like an outline of a woman, but it's very faded. And I feel like they also kind of made it sort of like sand on purpose. I don't know if that was on purpose. Maybe they just faded it out and that's what turned into, but to me, it looks like they did that on purpose to make it kind of like gritty looking, kind of like sand and that show.
Yeah,
so it just gives like sort of that style without too much to it. I thought that was really cool, but some don't even have illustrations in them. So I would say it's more of a outline of the show, an outline of the season. Each episode, like a sentence or to a paragraph of what these next episodes will be. Wrapping up season 1, having an idea of what the first season is, and then just like really quick paragraph or a few sentences of, and this is what season 2 could be, and this is what season 3 could be, just to give an idea of like what's called the legs. So can this thing stand, and does it have longevity?
Yeah. Or is it just something we're going to pour money into and then it's going to like have a couple good episodes and then end?
Right, because it runs out of ideas and now we don't know what we're doing. And so that pilot was really great, but you didn't really know where you're going after that. So having a show Bible at least show that you have an idea for where the season's heading. And if it's a narrative linear show where each show is branching off the next, it's a very good thing to have. Even if you're not doing it for the networks, it's a good thing to have for you as a writer to be able to, or a producer or whatever you are, to be able to maintain the idea of what this is about. And if you're a writer, it's a good way to keep track of like where you want this to go without having to think of it on the spot after getting picked up.
Especially if you're creating a world, I feel like that is especially important for you to have some basic rules of the world, some fundamental characteristics and stuff like that when creating it, because that way there's some structure to it, like, there's a rule set, like if it's magic, there's somewhat of a system, and so it's not just whatever they want when they want, you pull it out of their butts type situation.
Right. Was Stranger Things based on a comic?
I don't know. I don't doubt if it was. I never
It
actually
looks
looked
like a
into it.
comic. I'm not sure if that's just because it's 80s style, but either way, the Stranger Things one, it was originally going to be called Montauk, and they made this as their cover just to draw people into it, and then they said all the thing. Montauk, 8-hour sci-fi horror epic. And then they go on to say all the other stuff that I was already talking about. If you guys want to look at any more of these, just go to screencraft.org. 21 series Bibles that every TV screenwriter should read. And it'll give you an idea of what they had the ideas for the show and how these shows successfully got picked up and started being
I just
created.
thought they were so fun and so cool to like see the process of everything and the outlines that they had and the ideas that they had, you know. It's really interesting because I always wondered that, especially for TV shows, like how far ahead do they think? And when do they have to like change things? And of course it depends on the show, but it's still kind of interesting to see, especially if it's a show you liked or you really like or something similar to what you want to do, to see how they did it. I feel like that's really helpful and fun.
Yeah. And so it's really good to just kind of show what you're going for and how you're doing it and what it's about, what it's all going to be about and why and who these characters are and where they go and what the episodes are like, where the location's like and the style and the tone. That can be communicated through pictures and art, or it can be communicated through just script. But like I said, if you're trying to show tone and that type of stuff, it's just easier to show a picture, show a design, because it shows the tone. You've made it for that reason. So that's just some stuff to think about if you're trying to do a TV show. All right, moving on from that, we're talking about mood boards and lookbooks. We've already talked about this somewhat, so I'll just try to jump in, get this done quickly. The filmfun.co is where this is from. Let me see. It's from the websites. So it's letter F in the syllabus. Mood boards. Mood boards, or they're also known as inspiration boards. They're part of the production design team and the art department to kind of give that feel and look. It's a collage of different visual elements that can help guide a film or a show to illustrate the look, tone, and style to the crew, as well as act as a reference for the production designer, the director, and the producer, and anyone else involved. So that they can look at it. And if they had no idea what the show is going to be like, they can look at this and see kind of the color schemes they're going for. You can see in the image, this one has like those little color palettes right there, little blue, lighter blue, yellow, red, orange. That kind of shows the colors that might be in this project. And show like a little map design of what it might look like with the Ferris wheel and the composition, as well as the framing and everything else of some of these. And some of these are just for their outfits, their costumes, their character likenesses, like the guy with the giant legs, and it looks like it's at a circus. So you can kind of start getting the idea of what this either film or TV show is about. These are made for both any kind of media. So they're even made for commercials and stuff. So it's just a way to express the visual style to the crew and just use as a reference from the production designer and the director. Mood boards can be made before a show or film is made to help pitch the production to investors and distributors or networks and studios as well. So this could be part of the pitch. You know, look at this. This is kind of what the feeling of the show is. You could show them this or show them a picture of this, as well as the TV show Bible or the lookbook that you also have for another pitch, and the scripts, of course, if you're trying to pitch to anybody. Or these can be made during pre-production to help everything stay consistent, or they can be made for both. So you might make it for pitching it, and then you might keep it or slightly adjust it for actual production later. Mood boards aren't used in every production because some filmmakers kind of find them confining, and they don't want the production designer to get locked to a certain idea. So some filmmakers decide not to have them for that reason. They want the inspiration and the ideation to come naturally and in the moment. Whereas if a director were to make one of these mood boards and then show it to their production designer and be like, something like this, they might see the costume design, they might see the framing, they might see the colors that they have picked and be set. Even if they try to come up with other ways to do it, they might just in the back of their mind always picture this guy and his costume every time they think about a character in the show, just because that's what they were originally exposed to. But other filmmakers think it's really good to have to show the elements and just kind of the idea of what they're going for, and the production designer can use it to work off of it. Also, a production designer might be the one who makes it. So it just depends on the production, the people involved, and their style and way of doing things. But these can either be for pitching, for production, for both, or not in the film at all. And it's either made usually by the director or the production designer, or they both work collaboratively to create it. Mood boards can either be physical cork boards with pictures, words, colors, phrases, quotes, and more attached to it. So like what we're looking at here. Or they can be something digital, where you just see it on, go on a web page or something, and you can see, now we see the color design is this black, this light turquoise color, blue, this pinkish salmon type. And then you can see that in the pictures that they chose, and maybe the architecture and kind of the composition that they might be going for these different shots, or just the feeling of this is what we're going for the scenic elements. So they can be digital or they can be physical. The digital will have the same elements as the physical ones, you know, pictures, they can have words, colors, phrases and quotes. But because it's digital, they can also add sound effects or pieces of music or GIFs or video clips to also help illustrate what they're going for. I think that in this top one, it actually shows like a little video clip. So that is something you wouldn't be able to have on a physical one. And so, you know, again, depending on the people and who make it, they might decide to go for one or the other. They might make a digital one and then print it out, or they might just want to go all physical with it, or just go all digital. It just depends on the individual and how they want to work. Some things you might want to cover in a mood board are set styling, locations, the time period, fashion, mood, the color palette, shot details, and specific lighting setups or props. So you might want to show that you want the sun to come from this side and you want it to look very bright and vibrant, so that the cinematographer comes in and they can get an idea of the lighting style, and then they can communicate that with the gaffer, and they can check out the shot composition and see if the director is, you know, and like, yeah, I do kind of want it like that, and get an idea of how to do the shot list and the storyboard and whatever else. So these are very important if you have them on set, to keep everybody consistent with what we are going for, keeping everyone towards the same vision and goal, to get that end goal, to get that feeling of this is what we're going for, this is what it looks like, and this is how it's kind of what we're trying to mimic. It could be shots from other movies, and it could be other costumes that are similar to yours. It doesn't have to be random stuff from the internet. It could be from other films that inspired this one or that is similar to this one, so that you can get an idea of what you're going for. If you're making a film kind of like Lord of the Rings, then you might want to pick some stuff from Lord of the Rings, your favorite shots that go with your project. if it's all the greenery that you want in there, if it's the big wide open helicopter drone shots, that kind of stuff you want to put in there to give the idea of what you're going for in your project, because not everything is going to be exactly like Lord of the Rings. Of course, it shouldn't be anyway. You should have some similarities and some dissimilarities. So pick the similarities and then pick some other movies and some other places and costumes and images and whatever else to kind of show the overall feel and visual style of your project. Also, I've seen some that have short character bios or descriptors on the mood board that can help with casting. So you might have a picture of some person. It might be like the Lost pictures were in their TV show Bible, where it's just like a blacked out outline of a person. And then you might have like little words to describe them, like eccentric, and dresses fancy, just little tiny things to kind of describe them. Or you might have little short bios like, Susie, blah, 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 blah. She likes to do this. She likes to go there. Mike likes to do this. And then that way casting can come in and see kind of what you guys have an idea of for the characters, what they're like, so they can help illustrate that with their casting calls to get the actors in. So mood boards can be used for more than just the visual people. It can be used for casting. It can be used for post-production, whatever else. You can add different elements of all sorts of things. You can see that there's also like that little material on here, that little blue material that could be used for costume design. So the costume designers know, the wardrobe department knows the style of material you might be going for. And then, like we were saying earlier, they might make their own costume mood board where they have it dedicated to just costumes. This one's more dedicated to all art department aspects, as well as maybe some casting and post-production stuff. But for the most part, it's about the look and the feel of the film or the TV show. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or anything to add about mood boards? All right, and I think for our first exercise, well, after we've watched our first movie, I think the mood board might be a good thing to do for like concept and ideation for production design, because it really starts to get you thinking about different elements that go together and kind of set up what a project might be. So keep that in mind. We might be using that as our exercise at some point later in the semester. And then lastly, there is what's called a lookbook. Lookbooks are much like mood boards. They're either used in pitching or to communicate the look and tone of the project with the crew, or for both. You might use it to pitch it, to be like, this is what it's going to be like, and then have it on set, kind of like with the TV show Bible, but for film. They can be anything from 5 pages to 100 pages as well. And they can either be printed like this one, or they can be digital. Just depends on how you want to do it or how the person making it wants to do it. This might be done by the cinematographer, the director, or the production designer, or a combination of 2 or 3 of those people, usually is who makes these. Lookbooks can have all of the same elements that mood boards have, like costumes, locations, color palette, images for framing and composition, time period, and etc. Some filmmakers make a lookbook as more of a way to show the story in more of like a step-by-step kind of way, compared to like a mood board where it's just all over the place. It doesn't really follow any kind of linear path. If I go from the top left and go down, and then I start right next to it and go down again, it's not really following a linear path. If I start from the top left and go right, it's doing the same thing. It's just a bunch of different random stuff that makes up the entire feel and setting of the film. Whereas a lookbook can kind of go in order and show more of like a step-by-step. If you have the scenes in your head, you might go, okay, where are the locations at? One's in the forest, and then one's on this, one's right outside of a river where the guy looks like an angel or something shining. But you might have it in order like that, like this happens, then this happens, then that happens. So you're still showing it visually what is happening in the film. You're just showing it in more of an order and making a story out of that. You might also do it just with like framing and how the scene might be broken down. You might want to start with a close up and go kind of like a visual storyboard, in a sense, but not always. Sometimes they can just be like a mood board and just have things to kind of give the sense of what this scene is going to be, what this character is going to be like and look like, and stuff like that. They don't always have to follow a linear story. They can be more, yeah, some of them can be more of like a collage of images, while others can be more of like a this happens, then this, then that, in a linear path. Most filmmakers try to keep lookbooks as visual as possible, with words, phrases, and quotes being not too much on there. Like on this one, you can see there's a few at the bottom, but for the most part, the majority of this thing, it's called a lookbook, and that's because you want to be looking at visual elements. And so that's why they typically try to keep it very visual and have the majority of it be some pictures or multitude of pictures and visual elements instead of being paragraphs and biographs and whatever else to explain what is happening in the film. Everything else aside, if you are an independent filmmaker, making a mood board and or a lookbook will help you think about the tone and atmosphere of it. So it makes the project feel more real. First of all, if you only have it on the page, if you've only written it in a script, it's not going to start feeling real until you start working on it more. And if you're trying to get some financing and stuff like that, these are going to help, but also it's just going to help you feel like you're moving along, getting this thing made, making it become a real thing. So working on elements like this can also help you pitch it, but it can also help you just feel like you're moving forward with your project, because you are. And it also can give you more ideas for how you want to shoot it, and helps you think of cinematography, lighting, color palette, and production design choices for your project. So you can start thinking about all that before you even get into production or pre-production. Even when you're in development, you can start thinking about all that stuff. And does this make sense? Where do I want the story to go? If you don't have the whole script written out, sometimes it's good to start on these as well if you're an independent filmmaker, because you can get a visual sense of what you're writing, and then you can kind of maybe have a better idea of how you want it to end or where you want it to go. Typically, a mood board and lookbook will be either done by the director and production designer, like I said. They can both create it together, and a lookbook is sometimes created by cinematographers, because they might focus more on the composition and the framing and what's in frame, what's not, stuff like that. So they might be the ones that make it, or it could be a collaboration amongst many people. It's like I was saying, Premium Beat explains it, a lookbook, and it sounds very similar to what goes into a TV show Bible. So I would say a lookbook can be viewed as kind of like the TV show Bible film equivalent, because you don't need a TV show Bible for a film, but a lookbook will kind of do the same thing. It just won't explain as much through words, because that's, the script will do that for the most part. But a lookbook will show what is on the script through visual elements. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or anything to add?
Does lookbook have, is it also for the TV shows?
I believe sometimes, but I think a TV show Bible is usually used in its place, but I'm not 100% on that. I would say probably is used on some of the bigger ones, because the larger and the more money they're trying to get, usually the more elements that they bring. Here's our lookbook and here's our TV show Bible, because the TV show Bible is also more about explaining the season, whereas the lookbook is more about showing it through pictures.
Right.
So I
Mostly
would
for
say
pitching and
it
funding
makes sense
purposes.
to have both on a TV show. Yeah.
Yeah. Looks good. Mind this.
Yeah, it looks cool. All right, last thing I'll say tonight is what we're studying for Thursday. Thursday, we're going to be talking about props masters, also known as property masters. And props is just the short term of property. So if you hear that, it's not talking about locations, it's talking about all the props. And we're going to talk about props. So those two will be combined into like one thing. Distribution deal negotiation. So we're going to go further into some of the stuff that you might want to negotiate on and look out for in a deal, and kind of be aware of. Less of like the huge negatives like red flags and scams, and more of just like, these are generally going to be in most deals, but you can negotiate them. So here's what you want to look out for to figure out what you want to negotiate. What their fees are, distributors and sales agents. PMDs, what those are, producers of marketing and distribution, what they do, and how they're different. And aggregators, what they do and how they're different. I think aggregators are kind of like distributors with, less, they just mainly get your thing ready for online posting. But we'll talk more about that Thursday, because I'm not really sure yet. I haven't really looked into that stuff as of now. But thank you guys. Thanks everybody for being here, and appreciate everyone. Have a good few days, and hopefully I'll see you guys all back on Thursday.
Thanks, guys. Good night. See you Thursday.